of the St. Paul City Council to order. Roll call, please.
Kim?
Here.
Pravatsky?
Here.
Yang?
Here.
Bowie?
Here.
Johnson?
Here.
Jost?
Here.
Council President Naker?
Here.
7 present, no one absent.
Welcome, everyone. So glad that you could take time to join us in our council chambers for our meeting today. I want to first start by welcoming our brand new interim Ward 4 council member, Mr. Pravatsky. Really glad to have you with us. It's your third meeting of the day already, or maybe even fourth, so you have hit the ground running. I want to invite everyone to join us in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Consent agenda items 2 through 20 are before you for your consideration.
Is there anything to be taken for separate consideration? Seeing none, I'll take a motion from Mr. Pravatsky to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7 in favor, no one opposed. The consent agenda is adopted.
And we are going to do a slight reordering because we have some significant public hearings tonight that we anticipate will take some time. So out of respect for a couple individuals who are on the phone for legislative hearings, we're actually going to do that section of the agenda first. So I would welcome up Ms. Mormond to let us know what is on the docket. Welcome, Ms. Mormond.
Good afternoon, Council President, Council members. There are 3 addresses that I would like you to pull. The first one is item number 29.
Ms. Mormon, did you want to do item 27?
Oh, excuse me.
Also?
Yes, 27 on discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Item 27 is RLH TA 24-335, ratifying the appealed special tax assessment for property at 586 Burgess Street.
Ms. Mormond.
Council President, this is an assessment that you had a public hearing on, I think, about a month ago, and the question was whether or not the assessment could be divided over more than 5 years. We have worked with the City Attorney's Office and been through the state law on this, and I believe that, yes, it can be divided over the 7 years that the council member was interested in. Therefore, I put together an amendment for the council member that indicates it would be payable over 7 years. Separately, I am asking that you refer to council research and the assessments office to develop a section of the assessments policy that deals explicitly with payment time periods.
Thanks, Ms. Mormond. So there's a recommendation in front of us for the 7 years, as well as a recommendation that we assign staff to develop that payment policy. I'd look to Ms. Bowie for a motion.
Yes, I motion to approve. I just want to share as well. Thank you, Marcia, for doing that work and learning more, particularly about that process. So I also support that motion as well.
Great. So there's a motion on the table. Any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted as amended. Item 29 is RLH TA 25-118, ratifying the appealed special tax assessment for property at 759 Charles Avenue.
Ms. Mormond.
Council President, this is a vacant building fee, and the assessment was for the full amount of, excuse, my computer is not cooperating, sorry, just a second. $2,618 is the full assessment being put forward. The appeal, the appellant indicated in the appeals process that the Department of Safety and Inspections had granted 2 3-month waivers and therefore thought that he should be extended grace and a proration should be of the entire fee for 6 months, and so cut it in half just because of those 2 waivers. That waiver time period, however, is billable, and a waiver simply means if you finish it within the waived time period, then it's waived. If you go beyond that, it is not waived. This went beyond that, and so I'm recommending not for it to be cut in half because it's 8 months out of the 12, but rather reduced to $1,964. At 8 months, I normally wouldn't make the recommendation to reduce it at all, but for the Department of Safety and Inspections representations to the owner.
Great. And do we have someone to testify on the phone?
We do.
Okay. Great. So this is a public hearing. We'll first go to the phones.
Yes,
Ms.
Council President, can you hear me okay?
We can.
I have Cook Lee on the line. Ms. Lee, please press *6 to unmute yourself. You will have 2 minutes to address the council. Please start with your name. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Lee.
Ms. Naylor, we're not hearing anything in chambers.
Okay.
Hello?
There we go. We can hear you.
Yep, yep. So, it's I introduce myself, right?
Yes.
So, my name is Gokles. I'm an appeal for my property at 790, 759 Charles Avenue. So, that is for the building vacant fee. So, I want to ask for the waiver of that fee because for the first time, I'm already did with the registration for that, and I don't know that is that the second time for more like 3 months. And at that time, I'm not in the city, and I'm out of the country, and looks like I'm just out of my control for that. So, can you please give me a waiver for that?
Great. Thank you very much for your testimony. Is there anything else you wanted to say? We still have a minute left if you wanted to add to that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Ms. Naylor, do we have anyone else on the phone to testify? On that
Not on this item.
Okay. And is there anyone here who'd like to testify on this item? Seeing none, I'll take a motion from Ms. Bowie to close the public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed.
Ms. Bowie.
Well, I really appreciate getting that feedback and that input from the resident. I know had a chance to talk directly with Marcia about what is more equitable, particularly with the payments and with also the testimony that was given. Marcia, can you give me a brief again? And my apologies, because I'm also just trying to make sure I have clarity on what exactly was within scope and what we can actually move from.
What you have in front of you is a tax assessment that covers the cost of having a building in the vacant building program for a year. What we do in the hearing process is try to create an incentive for people to rehabilitate the building more quickly, and we try to put that incentive together as if you get this done in 90 days, that's the most common waiver, you would not have a vacant building fee. So get all over that, get the building done, and you've gotten yourself out from underneath the $2,600 fee. It is occasionally extended to 6 months, exceptional circumstances, and it is not, in my opinion, to be extended beyond that 6 months, but rather to have the council make the decision in all cases at that level. This particular building was in the vacant building program for 8 of the 12 months, and that is at best, I'm recommending 1,964, so that is a significant reduction, and it takes off basically 1/3 of the bill. So I wouldn't recommend the council goes more deep in its cut, but it could you certainly have the authority to do so.
And then also, how many months do they have to pay, or is this over the course of, they have to pay this within a year, or do we have a duration for them?
The recommendation in front of you has the assessment payable over 1 year. The council can divide this. I would recommend no more than 5 years at a maximum for the division of this.
Okay, I think I would like to motion for 5 years.
So the motion is for the application of the vacant building fee as recommended by the legislative hearing officer, but payable over 5 years.
Correct.
Great. Thanks, Ms. Bowie. There's a motion on the table. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted as amended.
Is there another item, Ms. Mormon, for separate
Yes.
consideration?
Yes, number 39, please.
Item 39 is RLH TA 25-120, ratifying the appealed special tax assessment for property at 120 Lighton Place.
Ms. Mormon?
This is another vacant building fee file that you have in front of you, and the time period for this fee is March of '24 through March of '25. The 25-26 vacant building registration and fee was actually in front of the council on March 19th. At that meeting, you decided that this next fee, the 25-26 fee, could be waived for a period of 90 days. So if the work is done, that would be the outcome. What we're looking at right now is a case where the building has been in the vacant building program for the entirety of the past year. And I would recommend approval of the assessment in whole. The owner and representation are here to speak to that. And if you have any questions, I'm available before or after, obviously.
Great. Thanks so much, Ms. Mormon. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Come on up. And this is just for all folks who are going to be speaking during our public hearings today. When you come to speak, just stand right between the two microphones. You don't need to touch them. They'll pick you up just fine. Say your name and where you're coming from today. And then at the end, please make sure that you sign in on either of the two clipboards on either side of you. And you do have 2 minutes, so welcome.
Thank you. Welcome, Council President and Council members. My name is Michael O'Neill. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Martin and Squires. I'm here on behalf of the building owner, in this case, Michael Bourne. So I just want to give the council and the president a little bit of additional information. This is an unusual case where I think the equities speak to the council and the president considering waiving this assessment. So my client, Mr. Bourne, lived next to the parties who had the vacant building. There was a fire. They couldn't afford to build the house because of the fire. They had to leave. And so my client made an agreement that he would go in and that he would do what is necessary to become owner of that property. So what he did is he contacted our firm. We did what's called a decree of descent. The owner of the property had been dead since, I think, 2003. It was someone who had never had the property transferred. So my client hired us. We were able to get the petition in, signed in April. We were before the court in June. And then we had the decree of descent ordered such that in July, the ownership actually transferred to my client, Mr. Bourne. Then once that happens, before he could do any destruction of the fire-damaged property, he had to get city approval. The city approval was given for him to start working on that in a letter dated October 25th. My client never received that. I don't know what the issue was. Once he knew that he had the ability to destroy the fire-damaged property, he did that in February of this year. For all these reasons, I'm just respectfully requesting that the court consider waiving the assessment against my client because of the investment that he made, over $17,000 in 2024.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Anyone else here to testify on this issue? All right, seeing none, I'll take a motion from Ms. Bowie to close the public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed.
Ms. Bowie.
Well, thank you, Attorney Michael, for being here and testifying, and also, Bourne, if you are in the audience, thank you for also being present through this appeal process. I would share, just hearing this information, it's a lot of information to take in, and I'm looking at some of the notes here, and for some reason, I'm not able to see the meeting notes from the public hearing. for the public hearing.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the right
What-
before that.
Was there a public hearing, like the Tuesdays public hearings? I don't see any of those
Yes,
meeting
of
notes
course.
on here.
There was a legislative hearing conducted on February 25th.
Okay. 25th. I would say, just because we're getting this information now, and also just kind of what was brought before me, I would need more time to consideration. Marcia, just, hearing from you in this matter, would, like to lay this matter over a week. Would that change anything substantially about this vote if we were to take it today, or can this be laid over for next
It would
week?
not change anything. Well, I would like to put into the record that the inspection report that was referenced was a code compliance inspection report. So the trades going through and creating a punch list of the things that needed to be done. That was generated on October 25th of 2024. And the building permit applications were made on April 3rd of 25 and February 20th of 25.
Thank you. And I guess since you're here, I would like to lay over, because I think, I do have questions, but just want to make sure we have the time committed to this decision. So I would like to ask my colleagues for approval for a motion to lay this over 1 week.
Thanks, Ms. Bowie. I would appreciate having that additional time as well to understand what's going on here. So thank you for the motion. I'll support it. Is there any discussion of that motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is laid over to April 16th.
Is there anything else to come before us for separate consideration?
Item number 46.
Item 46 is RLHTA 25-76, ratifying the appealed special tax assessment for property at 1141 University Avenue West.
Ms. Mormon.
This is another appeal of a vacant building fee at this address. In this particular case, the owner indicated that he had acquired the property without the previous owner having disclosed to him that it was in the vacant building program. Because of that, he is saying that he should not be responsible for this vacant building fee. What I usually reference in these situations is that it is the responsibility of the seller and the buyer to resolve these kinds of disputes, that the city was not a party to the transaction on the property. And so if there is a concern that he's facing a fee that he doesn't believe he should have, that the city is not where that concern would be appropriately directed. I do have on camera the building in question, and the parcel, there's like two parcels connected here. There's a small building, and then this parking lot is connected to it as well. So that's what we're talking about there on University. I can field any questions now or later.
Thanks, Ms. Mormon. Any questions for Ms. Mormon before we hold the public hearing? Doesn't look like it, and I know we have someone on the phone. Ms. Naylor, we are ready.
Yes, Council President, I have Chinedu Ezerique on the line. Mr. Ezerique, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Please start with your name. You have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Naylor. Thank you, Council President and Council members. The reason why I'm presenting this information is I sent a copy of a letter that was given to me by the Department of Inspections for that letter from 2022. That was prior to our ownership. Also, this is my first property outside of our home that we own here in St. Paul. And I'm a small business owner. And the hope with this building was to get our business back up and running. And it's been a long process. It's something that we've been working through. In the midst of it, in our home, we basically had to deal with a well going out and had to pay for a well. And it's basically prolonged the process of getting this building up and running. Our hopes are that you could see that with us not knowing that the building was not ours at the time that it got in this program, And just being so new to property ownership, it's basically turned into something that was unexpected, and we've been just trying to do our best to work through it with the limited resources that we do have. So my hope is that that the council could take that into consideration and possibly waive the fee if possible.
Great. Thank you so much for your testimony. Is there anyone else here to testify on this item? Seeing none, I'll take a motion from Mr. Provatsky to close the public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed.
Mr. Provatsky.
Thank you, Chair Naker. And Ms. Moorman, I'm curious, I think you did a good job laying out the basics of the situation. In terms of the current status of the building, I'm seeing some communication where the building is now habitable and usable, or are we currently still in the point where we're short of that code compliance?
At this point, we have active and issued permits for interior construction, furnace replacement, furnace, drain, and some lighting work to be done. All of those permits are active issued, which means there's a permit out there, but there's been no phone call for a rough-in inspection. So that would tell me that we are earlier in the process rather than later in the process. And with so many open permits, that's not telling me that we're close to that finish line in this case.
And I see, thank you, Chair Naker and Ms. Moorman. And I see too some communication about a possible request for a reduction or have there been other sort of asks on that side from Mr. Ezerique in terms of actions the council will take?
Not to my knowledge. I could search for that now.
Okay. And sorry, Chair Naker, Ms. Moorman, what your recommendation would just be to ratify this special assessment, or would there be any further recommendation?
My recommendation is that the council ratify the assessment. Unfortunately, the condition of the building, the fact that it's in the registered vacant building program, that the certificate of occupancy was revoked 6 months prior to that, those are things that don't go away with a change in ownership. They are sold with the property, and so it's unfortunate, but I believe that in these cases, our advice has consistently been to seek recompense through the title company, and if not that, then through the seller. These matters of disclosure are covered clearly in closing documents.
Thank you, Chair Naker, and thank you, Ms. Moorman, for the details on that. I tend to agree with the legislative hearing officer. I think it's an unfortunate situation that a new business owner would be caught in this position, but I do tend to agree that, while unfortunate, I think it's not quite the city's role to help resolve. Although I will say to Mr. Ezerique, we'll plan to reach out from our office to see how we can be helpful in the build out of this new business. I live in the neighborhood. I've walked by this building 1,000 times. I'm excited to see it used. So I'll reach out and try and be helpful however we can from our office, but I would move approval of the legislative hearing officer's recommendation.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Provatsky. There's a motion on the table. As part of discussion, I did have one question sort of along the lines of what you were asking a moment ago. I know we've talked about tonight and in other spaces the ability to extend the fee over a number of years, and I heard the testifier whose aims I also strongly support, talking about the difficulty of just the startup costs of opening up. I'm wondering if any conversation was had about extending the fee over 5 years. I agree that it should not be on the city to pay, but I wonder about whether that option was discussed.
All right, there was not a discussion of the vacant building fee being prorated over time. The discussion was focused on prorating it if the work was done by the deadline. So certainly the council could divide this assessment over time, and given that it is in the $2,500 range, I would say a maximum of 5 years.
Thanks, Ms. Moorman. I recognize that there's a motion on the table, and I would defer to you, Mr. Provatsky, on this, but given that information, I wonder if it might not make sense either to lay the matter over for a week to give time to ask whether or not that's of interest to the applicant, or perhaps just to extend it over 5 years today. I defer to you.
No, President Naker, I am thankful for that recommendation. If it's all right with the legislative hearing officer, we absolutely could lay over, and I could have some communication with the building owner. Certainly just to gauge what length of assessment period would be most helpful or not. So I'm definitely open to that.
Okay, so we'll take that as a revised motion to lay the matter over for 1 week. Is that copacetic? Okay. Okay, so the motion is to lay the matter over for 1 week. Ms. Yang.
Thanks, Council President. I am supportive of the revised amendment. And I do want to share that I remember we had a legislative hearing item like this come up maybe a few months ago, and we did decide to take the legislative hearing officer's recommendation. I do think that it would be inappropriate for us in the city to waive the fee, especially since the House has already been on the vacant building program for over a year now. So again, I'm supportive of it. I'm just wondering if for any future fees that do come before us for this property, is there, I mean, it sounds like there's already active permits, which is great. We want that to be happening. We want the building to be up to code 2 and in compliance. And so the option to prorate it if they were to finish the work before a year, for example, that option is still on the table, right?
Yeah, the bill that's in front of you today is August of 24 through August of 24 through 25. And he will be rebilled if it is still in the vacant building program. They'll send out a bill in July. And if that bill is appealed, 90-day waiver could be recommended to you at that juncture. If it goes to assessment, again, a proration would be possible at that point. So there's a couple different ways we can be of assistance down the line.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Yang. Any other discussion of the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is laid over to April 16th.
Is there any other items to come before us for separate consideration, Ms. Mormon?
I'm not aware of anyone else to testify on a legislative hearing item. If there are people who don't volunteer now, I'll be here to talk to them too.
Great. We will then call a public hearing on all of the other items for the legislative hearing portion of our agenda, which are items
Madam President, there are items 28 through 54.
28 through 54. So if you're here on items 28 through 54 and you want to testify, please come on up. Oh, let us know which item are you here for, sir? 33. Okay. Sorry, just 1 second. We'll read it into the record, and then we'll call the public hearing. 33.
Oh, I'm sorry. Item 33 is RLHTA 25-115, ratifying the appealed special tax assessment for property at 686 Edmond Avenue.
Ms. Mormont.
This is a vacant building fee assessment. The vacant building fee covers the time period of March 20th of 24, October 5th of 24 through October 5th of 25. What my recommendation would have been is that the council reduce the assessment in half if the work was completed by today. The work has not been completed by today, and therefore the resolution in front of you recommends that the assessment be ratified in whole. That assessment is $5,077, and we have just checked to see if there was anything. There's been no changes in that. So.
And Ms. Mormon, just to clarify, since we're talking about October of 24 through October of 25,
yes,
and we aren't yet at October of 25, if the work were to be completed before October of 25, that's when the prorating would take effect.
This particular bill you have in front of you, what I would do when I look at these is say, when did it go in the program? October 5th. So November 5th, October, December, January, February, March, April. So we're 7 months into the annual building fee, and when it passes that halfway mark, I invariably recommend approval of it in its entirety.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Mormon? Otherwise, we will hold the public hearing. Ms. Bowie.
Thank you, Ms. Mormon. So you mentioned like it will be prorated or reduced in half based off of if he was able to get the project, or excuse me, the renovations completed. Is there the ability for us to prorate it if there's like, if we're 3/4 into the year? I'm just wondering if that's an option for us.
Yeah, the exact recommendation in front of you is ratified and payable over 5 years.
Okay.
The council has the ability to reduce any assessment. Again, you do not do that outside of very exceptional circumstances, and the recommendation would be, it's beyond the 6 months, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. This is a public hearing. If you're here to testify, come on up. And just as a reminder, just stand right between the two microphones. You don't need to adjust them. Start with your name and where you're coming from, and then you'll have 2 minutes. And don't forget to sign in afterwards. Welcome.
Thank you, guys, ladies and gentlemen from the City Council of St. Paul here. My name is Sam D. Kong. I'm the owner of 686 Edmond Avenue. It's $5,000 is a lot. I don't have that laying around at this point in time. I did pull my permits. I'm doing the best I can here at this point in time to get the ball rolling. I want to get this out. I want to be out of the program. I don't want to do this at this point in time anymore. I am done. I am here today, just to plead. I know that it's past the 6 months. I'm doing everything that I can at this point in time to get this out of the program here. If you guys can, please, help me out here. $5,000 is a lot for me to just handle all the money that I've been doing. I've been doing a lot of stuff with my permits. I took stuff out, from there. So I just want to get you guys to help me out.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
I do have
Looked like there was a question from Ms. Bowie.
I just want to make sure, thank you, Mr. Kong, for being here. I just want to make sure you're making good use of your time. So when you mentioned that you have done all that you could, can you share with the council how far are you at with the work, and what is necessary for you to complete that work?
Yes, I pulled my permits. I actually took pictures on my phone, but it's on my phone. I knocked down the garage itself by myself, took that out, demolished it, and then I went inside my house, whatever was a recommendation that I had to do on my reports here. I have a couple pages from here that I actually did what I can without being the stuff that I need. I know that I have to have license on it. I'm waiting for that just to go through from here before I could say, hey, I've done this and everything ready. But whatever I can, if I could try to save money, try to help myself out as much as I can, I'm willing to do it, put my hands on it, and I'll go from there. I'm trying.
And I just want to, again, so I get you mentioned that the cost was high. Do you have an estimate of how much time it will be for you to complete this?
I know they said I have until October 5th. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to hit it before that October 5th right there. I'm hoping I don't have to come back here again, but I'm trying to make it before that. My plan is at least, September. I'm trying to get that out, trying to get it, the ball rolling, trying to cut that, be a done deal by then.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks so much. We're going to take a motion. Is there anyone else here to testify in this item? All right, seeing none, we'll take a motion from Ms. Bowie to close the public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed.
Ms. Bowie.
Thank you, Council President. Marsha, I just have a quick question, a point of clarity as well, because I know you mentioned the original recommendation, the item that's before us is to do a reduction of half if the project was completed. We have heard that it's not completed. Also have heard that there is a need for more time. So I'm wondering, with your recommendation, if you, I guess for what it's worth, if you're able to make a revision to that recommendation to where it could be proactive, to where, say, if Mr. Kong is done by September, that it is, I'm not able to do the math right now, but it's prorated in such a way to where, he doesn't have to pay the entirety of that vacant building fee.
At this juncture, that would be a motion of the council to make that adjustment. My recommendation is of record at this time. Just for the background on the building permit situation, so you have the detail from the file. The property went into the vacant building program October 2020. A code compliance inspection was performed in 2023. There have been 2 building permits pulled. One is for demolition interior. The other is for building permit to address the code compliance items. That was pulled, both of them in January of 25. The other permits, there's 5 pages of corrections in the code compliance. It covers all of the trades areas, so there are no permits pulled for 4 major trades areas. In my view, I think we are realistically looking at being helpful in the future, but at this juncture, it is completely up to you. My estimate would be that it would be into all that time.
Thank you, Marcia, for that. I think, it is fair to say that Mr. Kong had shared that he's doing all that he can, and it sounds like there's some financial difficulties to be able to do all the work, and that this fee will add on to that. But I would like to share for Mr. Kong that my staff is here to assist you for outside resources to help you with your renovations. I know being a homeowner is a lot of responsibility, and it's really unfortunate the circumstance that you're in right now. Given the flexibility that we have heard from Marcia and the flexibility from the council, I think you do have you have until October to get this in completion. So I'm going to move forward on the recommendation from our legislative hearing officer on that, and also just share with you, Mr. Kong, stay in communication. You can work with my staff to look at some resources to support you as you're renovating your house and getting it to a place that it's safe to live in. So thank you again for being here. But I'm going to also welcome my colleagues to support the recommendation from Marcia.
Great, thanks, Ms. Bowie. So we have a recommendation to support the motion of the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer,
Yes.
and an offer for help from the Ward 1 office as well to the constituent. Any discussion of that motion? Ms. Yang.
Thank you. I just wanted to understand a bit more about the, Marcia, what you mentioned earlier. Am I understanding it correctly that that typically your recommendation would be for us to ratify the fee like 6 months into the year? Like if the work isn't done within 6 months, then the recommendation would be to ratify it?
Prorate.
To prorate.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you explain the motion here, just so I'm understanding it correctly, because maybe I'm not understanding it.
Thank you for the question. Good for clarity for me too. As I understand it, the motion is to accept the recommendation of the hearing officer. There was discussion, I believe, of laying the matter over to September and bringing it back then for examination, but I think that was discussion and not actually put into the form of a motion.
Well, I guess if I was to withdraw my motion, you're definitely open for a discussion prior to the motion, and I think your question of clarity is helpful for all of us to know exactly what we are voting on. What Marcia had shared, particularly, and also, for what it's worth with Mr. Kung, to make sure that he is clear on it, is that we were going to prorate the vacancy building fee if he was to get it in completion within 6 months. It's now getting to that point of 6 months. The work has not been done. So we could lay it over, but by the time it lays over, it's just going to be a month, which he asked for. September will be already like over half into the year. So if that is something that, council members are, feeling strongly about and interested in, that is something that we can, we have the authority to make that make that revision. And that's why I asked the question earlier too of like what is a way we can like change that prorate. So is that something that you will want to support, Councilmember Yang?
Yeah, I would just share my initial thoughts, which is that that definitely seems like there's still time for the property owner to be putting in work into their property, bringing it into compliance. And so my preference would be that I suppose it would be a layover. We would bring it back in September, and then we can make a decision there on what to do with the fee. And hopefully by then the work is done, because what I heard from the testimony was that the owner said, I would like to finish this by September. We'll definitely hold them to their word. I would encourage for the property owner to stay in touch with you, because it sounds like there's permits that aren't being pulled that they would actually need to in order to get the work done. So that is going to be really important and urgent on their end. And so that would be what I would like to see in terms of a motion. I'm not sure if that would be a friendly amendment, or if Councilmember Bui, if you would like to make that motion instead.
I think that's something to consider. I also just want to be clear that if Mr. Kang is not able to get the work done by October, he will still be in the vacant building program, and then we will be looking into another year. I think the incentive is to get the work done as soon as possible, but also hearing from our legislative officer that there's quite a few permits that still needs to be pulled. For someone, especially representing Ward 1, we, as you can see, like there's a high number of vacant buildings in Ward 1. This has been a challenge for our residents. I have seen, even like in my family and in my community, that this is an issue that I think like council should address when it comes to investments. But to your point, to give Mr. Kang another chance to come before council and to ensure that those items are completed. I will I would motion to lay over in September not taking the recommendation from our legislative officer, but making a motion to lay this matter over. But I don't have the dates in front of me, particularly around when that layover would be. If you can assist.
While we're looking it up, it looks like it would be, we have many dates in September to choose from, but maybe September 10th would be the closest to today. Well, just one question and clarification, because I do think it's important to know what we're voting on. So. Yeah. It's October 24 to October 25. We're already 7 months into the year that is being billed. So we're past the 6 months, at which point you could have just half the year built. If we wait until September, we'll be 11 months into the year. I just want to make sure I understand, if we're talking about laying over to September, if the work is done then, are we talking about taking essentially a month off of a year's worth of the vacant building program at that point? Or are we talking about waiving the fee completely, which is not something that I think that we typically have done. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on what the purpose of layover is.
And also if Marcia, if you can share, because at least what's before us is just a prorate, and that's why I said the prorate is like per month, correct? So if we are laying it over to September, pretty much it will just be a prorate of 1 month. Like he will still have to pay the 11 months, but he'll have 1 month prorated that will be deducted from that. So I think it is important that we, have clarity on that point, because that's going to determine how much we're going to actually assess for this vote. If the project is completed, then it's prorated a month. But if it's not, then at that point, we'll be into another year of the vacant building program. So,
Ms. Yang.
And is that what you want to do with your original motion?
The original motion was not, since he did not complete the work, it was not approving the prorate. So that was the contingency that Marcia had brought forward.
Okay. My preference would be we can knock off the 1 month if they were to come back in September and the work was already done.
So I think we have a motion on the table to accept the motion of the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer, which was essentially to apply the vacant building fee in total. And then I think, Ms. Yang, you had suggested another motion to lay over to September. I think unless you're willing to accept that amendment to your motion, Ms. Bowie, we should vote on your motion first.
Well, I would rather, well, I guess, yeah, we can run the vote on that motion, but I also just wanted to make the just adjustment. So I think I already withdrew that motion already.
Okay, so you are now
I'm withdrawing my original motion in the spirit of just transparency, in the spirit of collaboration. I think Councilmember Yang brought up a good point, particularly around giving, if since Mr. Kang, I asked how much more time he will need, and stating September, but also I want to give the ability to where if it is done earlier, if there's a process where he can come before the legislative officer and get that work completed, and then we can talk about what that pro rate would be. I just not sure, because that's not our decision. That would be kind of more so the pro rate of when that work is done. But to answer your question, withdrawing my motion, bringing forth the motion that we just discussed with Councilmember Yang and ourselves.
Okay, so the motion on the table is to lay the matter over until September, at which time we might consider prorating and applying only 1 month of the vacant building fee if the work were completed at that time.
Correct.
Is there discussion on that motion? Ms. Johnson.
So I appreciate the conversation here, and I will be voting against the motion, but I think it's really important to center, not because I don't necessarily hear some of the challenges that are Mr. Kang has shared. It's because I'm not quite sure if we've done that at all in the past, and so I just think that it's really important that when we're reviewing these items, we remain consistent. And so that is an area for me that's slightly confusing, and would have supported your original motion, but genuinely today, I think I'll just be voting no on that.
Thanks, Ms. Johnson. I would agree that I will also be voting against the motion because I think it's important for us to be consistent. I know we are evaluating this policy as we speak because many of us have expressed concerns with it, but in the moment, it is the policy on the books. And as Ms. Moorman said, unless there's sort of extenuating extreme circumstances, we haven't typically removed the fee after the 6-month point. We can extend it over time, as we have done and talked about doing tonight, but I think this would be a departure from that practice, and I'm not sure I see the justification either.
Well, I just want to share
Ms.
too,
Bui.
for a point of clarity, we have done this in the past, but I do understand it has not been consistent. We usually it's more easier. Cut and dry, adopting the recommendation of the legislative officer, or just completely deleting the fee, which we do have the ability to do that. I think this is that equal compromise because we're pretty much he wouldn't, if he is done soon enough, we wouldn't want him to have to pay a full year for him to be in the vacant building program. So I, as a council member, it is my goal to incentivize people to get their work done as soon as possible. And if our incentive is that they don't have to pay a full year to be in our fee, I think that's an incentive to actually support our residents to make sure that their homes are feasible, or not feasible, excuse me, are sound and safe. But I do appreciate, people sharing where they plan on voting. I would like to bring the vote and also support the motion.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I think let's take a roll call vote.
Kim?
Yes.
Provatsky?
Yes.
Yang?
Aye.
Bowie?
Yes.
Johnson?
No.
Jost?
Yes.
Council President Naker?
No.
5 in favor, 2 opposed, those being Council Members Johnson and Naker. The resolution is laid over to September 10th.
Great. Thank you so much for the thoughtful discussion. Those of you who are here are seeing democracy in action, and it's not always rapid, but hopefully you're seeing the thoughtful deliberation we're giving to these issues. Anyone else here to speak on items 28 to 54? I am not seeing anyone, so we're going to hold the public hearing on all those items. Anyone here to testify? Seeing none, I'll take a motion from Vice President Kim to close the public hearing on all of our legislative hearing items and adopt the recommendations of the legislative hearing officer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearings are closed and the consent agenda is adopted as amended.
We're back to our regularly scheduled program. Number 21.
Yes, let me get to it. Item 21 is Resolution 25-434, amending Appendix A2 of the Administrative Code to establish the creation of the City Council Public Safety and Community Wellness Committee.
And Ms. Bowie, I understand there's an amended version.
Yes, I would like to issue a motion to amend version 2. I know my colleagues have received a copy of it, and it's also uploaded in Legistar. So,
You can move the amendment and then have the discussion on the whole thing.
and I believe it is on Legistar. It is listed there as an attachment.
Yep. I was just checking to see if we needed to vote to bring the amendment forward, but it's there, so we're just going to discuss the amended version, which is great.
Great. Well, first I just want to say, I appreciate my colleagues. I know this have been a resolution and a discussion for some time, as of December and then going into a retreat, and here we are now. We are voting on a resolution to establish a public safety committee that functions as a subcommittee, one that mirrors our structure and our existing council committees, such as our finance. We have our housing and operations. I want to take a moment also to thank not only my colleagues, but also the central staff and our city attorneys who took the time to craft this language. It was really it was a lot. I learned so much, particularly around this process of how we can design a process to actually help our work moving forward, and making sure that is written in clarity and purpose. And I also want to acknowledge the partnerships, the strong partnerships that we've grown throughout this process with the mayor and his administration and our dedicated officers, our upstanding firefighters, and so many others who work every day to keep St. Paul safe. Most importantly, I'm advocating today for the residents of St. Paul and for the people who call the city of St. Paul home, who are asking us, their council, to prioritize public safety within the same structure, the same transparency, and the same focus that we give to all of our other essential services. And for me, this vote is simple. This vote is calling the question of whether the St. Paul City Council believes we should hear from city departments and staff and government agencies and stakeholders on public safety. And we're doing that within the existing structures that we already have, and we're doing that within the tools that we have to create that space. And as council members, we convene on a monthly basis to receive updates on library, like we did earlier today, on our budget, and on water services that I proudly serve on. And we gather regularly for deep dives into our library systems, and I think public safety deserves that same attention. Public safety is no less important, and arguably it is in my ward, some of the most urgent and most visible functions of our government. And this vote is about managing our council business better. Really internal processing of information, making sure we have adequate time to hear from our department heads. So when we make one of the most important decisions of our jobs with the budget, that we are doing so in such a transparent way. So it's about giving the public a transparent space to understand and engage with the largest portion of our city's budget and the systems that most affect their daily lives. So I'm asking for my colleagues for us to vote yes for safety, vote yes for public safety, vote yes for the work that we do, and vote yes for an improved process and how we get there.
Thanks so much, Ms. Bowie. There's a motion on the table. Any discussion? I see Ms. Johnson.
I have a question for clarity, and that's just from the version that you're moving forward. Is it version 2 or version 3? And I'm asking because version 3 was the one that is including specific language. There's specific language changes from version 2 and version 3. So I'd like some clarity on which version you'd like to move forward, and then the version I'd like to see if we can have the resolved language that's different read into the record so I know which version we're specifically moving, or to get some clarity on that, because that will make
Yeah.
a difference.
Ms. Moore, can you clarify which version?
Yes, Council President, Council Member. In Legistar, it's version 3. It's actually the second version in reality of what it was, but when the file was entered, there was a mistake made, human mistake, where when they went to enter the file, they hit new in a place where they wouldn't have it, and it created a new version. So there are 2 versions, numbered 2 and 3. So 3 is the newest one. If you are on the public website and click on the file, up at the top, you'll see a little version, and you just click on the arrow to get to version 3.
It's like an apartment building with no 13th floor. And then you wanted something read into the record.
I just wanted to clarify that the public, could you read the definition for public safety on number, so under 5 in the committee functions, and just to clarify for the record then, the section that's number 5 for the Public Safety Committee, can we just get clarity on the specific definition for that?
Ms. Bowie?
You're requesting me or Sherry?
Doesn't matter.
Oh, well, I'll gladly do it. So for, and then what Councilmember Johnson is guiding us to is item, is actually, so A2, this is amendment to line 5, which is the definition of the committees. So we will be establishing and adding to our committee list, which says Public Safety Committee. The Council Committee on Public Safety shall oversee policy development and review and recommend legislation in these areas: public safety, police, fire, and emergency services, community first public safety framework, safety inspections and code enforcement, neighborhood safety, crime and violence prevention, diversion programs, and community partners and agencies.
Thank you. And as a follow-up,
Ms. Johnson.
I just simply want to say thank you for the extensive amount of work that has went into this, Councilmember Bowie and Council President and other leaders. I went through weeks and weeks with the committee, really being transparently on the side of not necessarily understanding why we should do it, being vocal about just who I felt like needed to be brought along during the process. I've even shared with my colleagues too my thoughts, especially as it was written previously. So that's why I really wanted to clarify on the language and what things have been changed, because I think it's really important that if we're establishing any committee, that we're doing so in partnership with the departments, the same departments that we are looking to work with. Since that as well, I've also had my own level of conversations with some of the departments, but also with the NSCC and the Neighborhood Safety Community Council, as well as members from the Office of Neighborhood Safety's staff team. And so being able to actually hear from them directly, just the questions and even just what we're trying to do, I think I'm missions aligned when it comes to being able to establish a public safety committee. And I also think that the multiple iterations and just being able to include the feedback from the City Attorney's Office, feedback from what you've been hearing, Councilmember Bowie, from your colleagues as well, is why, I've kind of transitioned from a space of being really, honestly, not necessarily, I wouldn't say skeptic, but definitely wanting to make sure that what we were establishing would be productive. I really love meetings, don't get me wrong, but I enjoy when they can accomplish the goals that we spend our time dedicated to, and I think public safety is incredibly important. And so just wanted to share that with you, and also kind of fill in the blanks for my community members and my colleagues too, who have heard me just ask questions, try to buy more time on this space. And I think today I'll be voting in favor of this, and it's really because you did take a lot of the feedback into consideration of what the scope will be for this committee. And I think the things that are listed here is within the scope of the council member and what our ability is to do. And so I appreciate the time you spent on it. I appreciate the feedback and the reception of that feedback. And I am thankful that we were able to have those conversations. And I just wanted to reiterate that I think it's really important that when we establish committees, council members are included in the process. And so I think over the last couple of weeks we've gotten there. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. And also thank you for the members of the NSCC that spent time with me yesterday morning actually talking about just some of their concerns. And I know a lot of folks are looking at what this will be. And I think you said it very perfectly, like this is a committee that the council was looking to continue to have organizations and groups like NSCC come and present in front of, and a dedicated space and opportunity to talk about public safety directly. And I think that that is well within our rights to do so. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Ms. Johnson. Other discussion of the motion? I'm sorry, Ms. Yang, you were next.
Thank you, Council President. I first want to show gratitude to you, Councilmember Bui, for all the work you have put into the resolution here. I definitely want to give Beef 2, your legislative aid, a shout out because they've done a tremendous job reaching out to council offices to get our input and just really make sure that we are getting the versions of the resolution here and getting updates overall. I want to share generally that, like, initially I supported the Public Safety Committee because I felt it was really important for us to have more spaces as an entire council to have really important conversations, whether it's around public safety. I mean, we already have a budget and finance committee. We have an Oregon policy committee too, and this interest around having a public safety committee, from my understanding, really stemmed from conversations that we had during our last budget season about police overtime especially, and just how over the years we have been spending more and more into that, and just haven't, as a council especially, been able to have, I would say, checks and balances into it and figure out what is the direction moving forward on how we can resolve that issue and prevent the overspending from happening. And so I also initially was very committed to serving as a vice chair for the committee as well, but wanted to share that in the recent weeks I have decided to rescind my support for the committee, and also in serving as vice chair, because as our current committees roll out and as our budget chair too, I really have seen the overlap that the Public Safety Committee would create with the two current committees that we already have. There is going to be topic overlaps. I mean, budget, the topic about budgets for our emergency response departments, it's a part of the Public Safety Committee here. I mean, that seems like it's really clear that that's going to be on the table. And so there's already questions to me, being referred over to me on whether something that we are going to be discussing within the council is going to live within the Finance and Budget Committee, or is it going to be within the Public and Safety Committee? And I don't have any issues with figuring all that out and sorting it out. But I do think that what is really important, especially in my role as a council member, where I understand we have so much on our plate from responding to constituents, and we also have many other boards and committees outside of our official city council role here that we serve on too, which we have yet to completely fill. There's still vacancies, and we're still trying to figure out how are we going to fill all of them and who's going to be serving on them. There's definitely a lot of overlap here, and having clear distinctions between our roles and our committees is really important to me, so that that we can stay organized in our work, we can be disciplined, and we can also be very efficient. And on top of that, continue to prioritize our time really for the residents who we serve in our ward. And also, there's many things that come up citywide that we respond to as well, even if it's not in our ward. And so I wanted to say overall, like, what I see in the resolution here is that what's in the code is that committees can be made up of at least 4 council members. And so should this committee here, the Public Safety Committee, be established, I do wish that committee's success and the council member success, and also am always willing to offer my input to further advance the work of the committee offline. It just, I think that overall my concerns as a budget chair here are very serious, and to date I have not really heard how we are going to really distinguish the roles that we have as council members on these different committees and the committees as a whole. So I want to say overall, what I'm really proud of is that I do get to serve alongside all of you who are champions of public safety. I mean, our city, we have an Office of Neighborhood Safety, we have a Neighborhood Community Council, we have so many things that are unique to us that make our city here just a really beautiful place to live in. We are innovative, creative, and we always put community members at the center of our work, and that's why we have all of these different and unique initiatives, and that's something I'm really proud of, and looking forward to how we can continue advancing and investing in all of that work there.
Thanks, Ms. Yang. Any other discussion of the motion? Ms. Kim.
Thank you.
I am very excited to be supporting the creation of this committee. Much like our other committees, we create strong policy, have a new lens and view of the city and sort of the offerings of services that we have. I just want to really extend gratitude to Councilmember Bowie. It has been an incredibly iterative process, but not because there have been issues, but much more because you have been taking into feedback of multiple perspectives of your colleagues, of the administration. And I just want to commend you because you have never once wavered on what the goal and intent for this committee has been. There is language around us right now that scapegoats communities like ours. There's narratives right now around scarcity of space or creating experts and who gets to be an expert for our community. And so I just really applaud the way that you're approaching the work, including more community voices, and also I think pushing back against the idea that there can only be one committee that looks at public safety for the city. Isn't more better? Isn't more voices, more ideas, more people included in the process better for a more robust approach? This is something that we've been thinking about in different ways in terms of programs and policies, but I think in terms of a committee, that's something that you have spearheaded for the council. And as I have watched sort of you work in the last year and also sort of develop your own lens for the city, Community First Public Safety is absolutely one that I've seen you be clear and very direct about. The last thing I'll say is, while the wellness part might have been an addition, I'll say what I said to you behind closed doors. There are absolutely powers that be and systems that be that require communities like ours to be unwell in order to perpetuate the harm that they cast upon us. Things like not offering a livable wage, not offering safe, affordable, and decent housing, not being able to afford childcare, not being able to afford medical expenses. There are absolutely systems that are created by us, quite frankly, the city, the federal government, the state, that are systematizing and creating social impacts. We are criminalizing social impacts of our decisions. And there's one, and so I'm very, very proud to stand by this today because I believe at the root of all of this, you are after wellness, and not just wellness in the way that we can afford the things that we need to put eggs on the table for breakfast, but wellness in the way that communities like ours and like yours and across the city deserve to thrive and be well and have joy, and not in spite of what's happening in the world, but because they just effing deserve it. So I'm very proud to stand by you, and I'm very, very appreciative of the iterative process. I absolutely see my feedback being included in the committee today, and I look forward to supporting the committee.
Thanks,
Thank
Vice
you.
President. Any other discussion? Mr. Profatsky.
Thank you, President Naker, and thank you, Councilmember Bowie. I definitely think the bulk of the goals of this committee are shared by all 7 of us. I think public safety, particularly the way described in this resolution, is just such a tremendous amount of what the city needs to focus on and what the community needs to focus on. Seeing as it's my first day and a lot of this context has been lost on or been outside of my personal experience, I do have a little bit of a reservation about some of the concerns we've seen from Director Blakey and others shared with us today. So I view the discussions that would take place in the committee as being possible both within, in this particular language, in the city operations space, in the finance and budget space. But whether this committee exists or not, I think these conversations should be taking place, and I'm someone that's deeply committed to working on these issues. So very supportive of the goals and aims, given how quickly it's come about for me in my very first day, and the concerns we've seen from some of the staff leadership. I'll be voting no, but I would be excited to be investing in these conversations and supportive of the work going forward.
Thanks so much. Doesn't look like there's any other comment. I will just say I want to echo the thanks to you for your leadership, Ms. Bowie. I have been a stalwart supporter of this idea from the very get-go, and one of the things that I've appreciated most about your persistence and, frankly, the way our council is approaching the work in general this year is that we're not just talking about the work, we're not just asking questions that go nowhere during a budget conversation, and well, we hope that somebody figures that out, right? We are committing to actually solving sometimes very complicated, thorny problems that we're identifying in these conversations. And your work to create this committee, I think, is going to help us do that. I also am grateful, Ms. Yang, to you for your leadership of the Budget Committee year-round, not just after we received the mayor's budget proposal, because I think that mirrors this committee in its attempt to really get at some of the systemic changes we need to make, Vice President Kim, to your point. And we can't do that in just hoping that someone else does it, and we can't do it in a couple months out of the year. So I will be supporting this as well, and I think, Ms. Yang, I take your point to heart that in helping facilitate all of the conversations at all of these committees, we are going to need to be very mindful of avoiding overlap, and we will. I will commit to helping to do that. With that, if there's no further discussion, I think we'll take a roll call vote.
Kim?
Aye.
Kravatsky?
No.
Yang?
No.
Bowie?
Yes.
Johnson?
Aye.
Jost?
Yes.
Council President Naker.
Aye.
5 in favor, 2 opposed, being Council Members Pravatsky and Yang. The resolution is adopted as amended. Item 22 is first reading of ordinance 25-30, amending Chapter 310.04 of the Legislative Code to regulate a more efficient method of cancellation when licensee is not in compliance with providing materials to be engaged in licensed activity.
This one is super exciting. Everybody hold on to your seats. We have a staff report from, I believe, Director Angie Wiese. She's here. She's coming. Welcome. I didn't mean to say it's not exciting. I meant to get everybody excited for it.
Oh gosh, gotta find my notes. Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Angie Wiese, Director of Safety and Inspections. Thank you for the time today. Yes, this is something that we're actually really excited about too. Just kind of to lay the groundwork, many people believe that a business license is similar to a gym membership. If you don't pay, you no longer have a gym membership. But because of the way the ordinance is crafted around business licensing, you actually still have a license. It's just delinquent until you pay it and get your required materials to us for renewal, and then in which case, you go through the renewal process. Because so many people believe it's more like a gym membership, we often get folks who go out of business for any number of reasons, and we're not their first call on to notify that and to request that their license be canceled. So it just stays there on the books. And that creates a number of issues, and I think the predominant one is that some of our licenses actually have things like separation distances, and so if there's a license on the books, then another business owner can't take advantage of that opportunity that might be presented because they're not eligible, again, given a distance requirement between different licenses or that type of license. Really, we've been wanting to do this for a while. It's just one of those things that never get to the front burner. The impetus and the reason why we're bringing it now is because of our Poly project. And in order to go from our legacy system that was built in the 90s, so, technology in the 90s is really like ancient, to a modern system, we have to transfer all of those records into our new system. And we really don't want to be transferring records that we know really don't exist and there isn't a business anymore. We still have to go through all of the things that you see in the ordinance in order to confirm that they're no longer in business, and anywhere where there's a doubt, it would still come through the normal council process in order to deny that license.
Great. Thanks so much, Director. I really appreciate the work that the department does to bring issues like this to the front burner. We hear all the time that it is difficult to open a business in St. Paul. It's difficult to operate a business. And I know that your department is constantly looking for ways to make that easier. And it may seem like a mundane change, but it is these sorts of changes adding up that do create a climate that is healthier and more open for business. So I appreciate the fact that it is your department, my name is on it, but it came from you, that is constantly originating these great ideas. And I encourage all departments to come forward when our ordinances are no longer helping but are maybe harming the kind of productive development that we need. This is just a first reading. We will have a public hearing next week and we will have a vote the week after, but any questions for Ms. Wiese while we have her here? Not seeing any. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
The ordinance is laid over to April 16th for second reading, public hearing. Item 23 is a public hearing of ordinance 25-21, granting the application of Central Internal Medicine Associates, PA, to rezone property at 635 Cleveland Avenue South from OS Office Service to T2 Traditional Neighborhood and amending Chapter 60 of the Legislative Code pertaining to the zoning map.
And we had a staff report on this item last week, so this is the public hearing. Is there anyone here to testify on this item? Seeing none, I'll take a motion from Ms. Jost to close the public hearing and lay the matter over to next week for final adoption. Any discussion of the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the ordinance is laid over to April 16th for final adoption. Item 24 is the public hearing of ordinance 25-29, amending Chapter 193A.08 of the Legislative Code pertaining to rent stabilization.
And although normally we have a staff report at the first reading, we actually saved our staff reports for this week since we were going to have public hearings and I think a lot of folks in attendance. So I would welcome up, actually before we do the public hearing, so sorry to everyone, we're gonna have a quick staff report. You were also on the ball though, I'm impressed. So I'm gonna welcome up, I believe, Ms. McMahon to give staff report and then we'll go to the public hearing. Welcome.
Hello, thank you so much. I am Melanie McMahon. I am the Deputy Director of the Department of Planning and Economic Development, here to give the staff report for the Rent Stabilization Ordinance Amendment. Start with just a little bit of the history of the Rent Stabilization Ordinance. This was a voter-passed initiative that passed in November of 2021. The ordinance, as it was drafted for the election, included provisions to mirror other communities, but the only other places with rent stabilization in the United States are coastal states. There are no other Midwest states or cities with it. And so there are things that were needed for St. Paul that were missing from the ordinance on the ballot initiative just to make it work for our city. And so amendments that were first made in March of 2022 included things like adding definitions. You know, originally none of the terms were defined, which is really important. For example, it limited rent increases to 3%, but didn't define what would actually count as rent. So adding definitions of that and others were added. Administrative placement was added. So in the original ordinance, the city didn't have the legal authority to administer or enforce the law because it wasn't placed in a department in our administrative code or given that legal authority. So that needed to be added in order for the ordinance to work, again, for the city of St. Paul. There's no severability clause. I know that's getting into the weeds, but that was missing. That needed to be ordered. That needed to be added with other things. It was effective on May 1st of 2022. And then council action was taken again in September of 2022 with additional amendments, again, to make the ordinance really fit within the city of St. Paul's laws and practices. So there needed to be a process for applying to the exceptions to the 3% rent limit. The original ordinance did explicitly give and allow for exceptions to go above 3% rent increases to get a reasonable rate of return, but it didn't provide any guidance or any process for receiving those exceptions, so those were added to the ordinance, as well as a new construction exemption. There was not a single other jurisdiction in the country with rent stabilization that did not exempt new construction, so that was added at that time. So moving on specifically to that new construction exemption. So as I'd stated before, jurisdictions with rent stabilization exempt new construction. And they do this across the country for a variety of policy objectives because we want and need new residential construction in our communities for more housing that we desperately need. The St. Paul ordinance currently exempts new construction for a 20-year time period after it's been built and opened. And so that's measured by looking at 20 years from the date that the city issues a certificate of occupancy for that building. So the proposed modification of this existing new construction exemption would be to exempt new residential buildings that receive their certificate of occupancy in 2005 or after. This provision provides certainty for financing, so you know what buildings would be exempt and for when. And the reason for 2005, because I know it's been asked before, is because the current exemption, again, being that 20-year exemption, is from the date of the issuance of that certificate of occupancy. So buildings with that issuance date in 2005 and after are currently exempt. So what this modification does is it keeps the status quo then for those. So this shows the age of the rental housing stock in St. Paul. There's a lot of different ways to try and measure and define rental housing. You can look at construction permit issuance dates for various different construction permits, certificate of occupancy dates, look at homestead versus non-homestead properties. Because the ordinance itself uses the date of the issuance of certificate of occupancy, that's what this map is showing. And so it's looking specifically at, again, that date of the certificate of occupancy. If you look at those dark pink or magenta, almost colored dots on those are buildings with a certificate of occupancy that was issued in 2005 or after. And as you can see by looking at this map, it shows that the vast majority of all rental housing in St. Paul was built before 2005 and would remain covered under the rent stabilization ordinance. It's also important to note that just because a building might be exempt from the rent stabilization ordinance under the new construction exemption, that doesn't mean that it doesn't have other rent increase protections from other parts of our city law or state or federal. You can look, for example, at income restricted housing units that would have protection from rent increases, maybe because they're tied to funding sources like from HUD, or maybe they have deed restrictions on the property, as we've done as well. So when you see here that the vast majority of all rental units do fall under the rent stabilization ordinance and would continue to with this modification to the new construction exemption, know that an even larger percentage also have rent increase protections through different sources of protections that exist within our city. Here next is a chart showing housing production in St. Paul. Housing production, just want to note, often can lag behind for a few years policy changes, for a few years, just because of how residential construction financing works. So it's really hard to finance residential housing construction, and it takes a long time. And I think we've all really seen that over the past year, at HRA and looking at different presentations of projects moving forward before HRA, seeing that, you'll hear folks describe the 1 or 2 or even longer year process that it really takes to get the financing to be able to move forward with construction. So a policy change, for example, in 2021 might show up in a chart like this in 2004 and after, which is where here you see that significant drop in housing production in St. Paul. Also wanted to give some other examples of new construction exemptions across the country. As I mentioned previously, there are no Midwestern states or cities, so not really a direct comparison that we can have to jurisdictions that are like ours when looking at rent stabilization laws. But other jurisdictions on either coast with rent stabilization, as I mentioned, do exempt new construction. And many of those have a fixed date for the new construction exemption, like this modification would be. So you can look at San Francisco, Washington, D.C., LA, New York City, examples like that have fixed dates for their new construction exemptions. So again, just a little bit of the background history and information about this proposed modification. I really appreciate your time.
Great. Thanks so much, Ms. McMahon. Any questions for Ms. McMahon before the public hearing? Seeing none, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And with that, we will start our public hearing. I do want to invite someone who has a very young constituent with us tonight who just stepped out to go first if she would like to, because it is hard to bring a young child to public meetings, and I admire it, and I want to respect it. So if she is here and able to come to the front of the line, come on up. You're first. Thank you. Thank you for teaching democracy at a young age. And just to remind you, so you'll have 2 minutes to say your name.
All right. Just a second. I have it. I thought this was a Price is Right. I felt really special. Okay. All right. Sorry. Bear with me.
Take your time.
Swear to God, I've been working on this with my boss. Okay. Okay. Hi. No, just kidding. Okay. Hi. My name is Sandy Timua. Last August, I was harassed continuously 20 times, over 20 times within 18 hours by somebody who found my personal address and my personal phone number. They threatened to harm not just me, but my barely 3-month-old baby. Verbatim at 11 p.m. on a Saturday night, they wrote, "You're after the wrong ones, B. You're gonna die. We hope your kid is there when we get there." When the harassment started, I wasn't home. So for 4 days, I could not go home. I could not even go and stay at my family member's house because I was afraid for their safety. I had no formula, no diapers, no clothes, no phone charger. I would like you to guess who this person was. It was a renter who had a UD, who had various charge-offs on her credit background, and a partner who had an extensive criminal background. Her guarantor also said he had a gun. To protect myself and my baby, I didn't go onto the property for 3 weeks. And by the time I got there, the renter had chosen to abandon the property out of their own free will and left over $2,500 in damages, cleaning, and unpaid rent. I had to leave that unit empty for 7 months because I was too traumatized to even market or show the unit. I want to let you know my parents, who are Hmong, who are people of color, chose to invest in this community, did this for 30 years. I've done this for over a decade. I'm a community organizer. I have marched on the highway in high-heel boots. Nothing shakes me, and this ripped me to the core. You can catch me outside the bar, but you cannot harm a child. When your ordinances includes an eviction file to be pushed out 30 days, if this renter had threatened to harm me and they were still on the property and this ordinance had existed, then they would have allowed them to actually follow through. I cannot be a mom to my baby boy if I'm a dead one.
Ma'am, I'm so sorry, but we are at time. I'm going to need you to wrap up.
Yes.
And I think it sounds like your comments might be related to our tenant protections ordinance,
Yes,
which is my fault because I called
It's
you right
okay.
up here.
It's
so
okay.
we're gonna assume
It's
that
okay.
this applies to tenant protections
Yes.
when we have that.
I
but
will wrap this up.
Please wrap up. Thank you.
I understand you stand up here for specific renters who don't want to be held accountable for the actions that lead to evictions. But my question is, who's standing up for people like me?
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Please remember to sign in before you leave. Thank you. And as we move forward with our testimony, again, just my apologies. So we are on number 24 for rent stabilization. Just a reminder, please come to the front, stand between the two microphones. They should pick you up just fine without adjustment. Say your name, where you're coming from. If you'd like to tell us whether you're a renter, a homeowner, or a landlord for context, you're welcome to do that. Again, I don't like to interrupt people, but my job tonight is to keep everyone to 2 minutes, which goes by fast. Please remember that you can also submit written comments for us if you feel like your time is just not enough tonight, and you can continue to do that after tonight as well. We will not be taking a final vote on this for several weeks, but please try to wrap up when the timer gets close to 2 minutes. Otherwise, I'll help you do so. Welcome, and please begin.
Absolutely. My name is Khalik Rogers, Executive Director of Catalyst for Systems Change. Thank you for this time. I'm just here to speak about my lived experience with housing barriers. And just to state, when I first moved to the Twin Cities, that my family was actually exploited by the landlord market, who took money for our applications, but denied us housing due to our lack of Minnesota rental history. And this led to housing instability and homelessness for my family at a young age. And so this personal experience fueled me to actually continue this work and expand access to stable, affordable housing. And I do see both sides. As a current renter, I deeply do understand the pressures that renters are under, but also recognize that blanket rent control isn't the answer. It risks limiting new housing supply and unintentionally hurts the very people it's meaning to help. There are better solutions. We actually need deeply affordable, permanent housing, not policies that slow down new development and/or strain small community-based landlords. I've also been able to help secure $20 million from the state legislature to reduce youth and family homelessness and create more housing stability. And it's structural investments like this that we need more of. What I'm saying is, I also worked with youth here in St. Paul specifically, who I actually did a PSA announcement showing that youth and family homelessness is going up. And I also co-led a study with Health Partners as well, where we worked with 30 other youth, and their top priority was deeply affordable permanent housing. So with that being said, I just want to also state that just overall there are opportunities for schools to help in other untraditional formats and ways that we can go about this, such as Gap School on the West Side, who is building affordable housing, also created a policy at the legislature as well for the Minnesota Housing Grant program.
Thanks so much.
I got you.
Gonna have you wrap up. Yep, appreciate it so much. Please make sure to sign in and come on up.
My name is Cody Fisher. I live in Ward 1 at 1017 Ashland Avenue. President Naker, members of the council, thank you for having this hearing today. I urge you to support the proposal to permanently exempt new residential buildings from rent control. We want St. Paul to be a place where people want to stay and always have the option to stay, a place people can afford to move and have stability once they are here. Affordable housing is essential for renters, and the current ordinance locks in our current housing shortage for decades. Without more housing, renters will remain in poor, unstable conditions, and the city will struggle to grow its tax base. St. Paul needs to grow. Our tax base needs it, our vibrancy and quality of life as a community need it, and we need it for climate reasons as well. We need people living in our core urban environments that are less car dependent. Why a blanket cutoff, as is being proposed here, starting at 2005? It's simple. As a real estate developer who tries to raise money from investors, I know it's predictable, it's clear, and it'll make it easier for developers to go to the market and try to convince investors that St. Paul is a stable, low-risk place to put their money. It achieves this while preserving the benefit of the ordinance because 94% of our rental stock will be still subject to the policy. Opponents of this common sense amendment argue that it weakens tenant protections and housing stability to the advantage of big developers. That's a false choice, and frankly, it's political pandering. Given our housing, infrastructure, and fiscal and climate challenges, St. Paul can't afford to willfully ignore economic reality and the overwhelming evidence we have available to us already. As a city, we don't have to choose between housing stability and housing abundance. We don't have to choose between broad-based housing affordability and enabling investment in housing development. We don't have to choose between broadening our tax base and protecting people who rent. The common sense proposals, this and the one to follow, before the council present a third way, a path of both and, a path of housing choice and abundance. I urge you to take that path.
Thank you very much. Perfectly timed. Come on up. Whoever's next, don't forget to sign in.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Katia Cepeda, and I work for the St. Paul in Minnesota Foundation, which is located at 370 Wabasha Street North in downtown St. Paul. At the St. Paul in Minnesota Foundation, we believe both are possible to uphold the values of St. Paul voters supported, like protecting tenant rights and maintaining affordability, and adapt the city's rent stabilization policy to support much needed housing development, which is why we commend the council members for embracing an and both mindset and showing a willingness to amend the rent stabilization and strengthening tenant protection codes in a way that reflects community values and evolving needs. Elevating renter voices must remain central to this process. Our biannual survey measuring indicators of community vitality in the East Metro revealed that East Metro residents identified affordable housing as one of the most critical issues facing the region. The data also shows critical differences between renters and homeowners. Renters were more likely than homeowners to call their community just a place to live rather than a place they belong, and they were much more likely to worry about making their rent payments, having enough money to put food on the table, and getting out of debt. Despite these worries, renters and homeowners alike had positive impressions of the East Metro as a place to work, play, and interact with people from different backgrounds. We know that East Metro is a desirable place to live with great amenities, but affordable housing is a real concern that impacts renters' ability to feel a sense of belonging. Therefore, on behalf of the St. Paul in Minnesota Foundation, we strongly support the Ordinance 25-29, amending rent stabilization, and Ordinance 25-31, amending strengthening tenants' rights protections. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Don't forget to sign in. Come on up.
Hello, my name is Michael Beckstrand. I live at 1863 Eigelhart Avenue in Miriam Park, and I am a social scientist at the University of Minnesota, a proud St. Paulite since 2015, and as both a renter and a homeowner, now a parent of 2 kids thriving at Groveland Park Elementary in St. Paul Public Schools. And I'm here to speak also in support of the proposal to permanently exempt new residential buildings from rent control. I find this to be a necessary step to make St. Paul a place where other people can move and find places to rent and then buy and live and thrive. I've been alarmed by seeing news articles and studies showing the slowing of new development in St. Paul, the continued rising rents, while our neighbors to the west continue to grow their housing stock and stabilize their rents without this kind of onerous policy. Our housing shortage is locking renters into poor and unstable conditions, and without increasing supply further, we will continue to strain our community, our local property tax base, which will impact renters and homeowners as they try to remain in Ramsey County and in St. Paul. This is also important in addressing a primary council agenda push of addressing climate change to increase our urban density and get people less car dependent and more carbon neutral. This exemption will provide stability for investors as well, which seems very important in this uncertain time as Washington seems to be throwing everything into chaos. We don't need to have another place causing difficulty in making investment in our community. So I urge you to adopt this common sense measure. As it stands, it feels like a very expensive way to make an ideological point. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Don't forget to sign in. Come on up.
Hi, welcome Councilmember Pravatsky. Thank you for your service. My name is Carolyn. I'm a renter in Ward 4, and I'm opposed to this amendment to the rent stabilization ordinance that 53% of St. Paul voters approved to protect ourselves and our neighbors by intentionally creating reasonable guardrails around developer and landlord profits. As everyone's already spoken, I am not naive. I understand St. Paul is facing existential challenges, and I acknowledge the deeply entrenched narrative, generations and billions of dollars in the making, that the housing market will do right by renters if we leave it up to those who profit most. And I also know from personal experience, over 20 plus years of being a renter, that virtually any measure that gives renters any meaningful power is met with developers and landlords patting us on the head and saying, no, 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 what we really need is more supply. But trickle-down affordability is both grossly insufficient and fundamentally unjust. And there's a large, growing national network of not just renters and organizers, but economists, academics, elected officials who have taken a more critical analysis of this supply will save us data and logic and are clear that we need a different approach. To truly solve the affordable housing crisis, we need interventions to stabilize the unpredictable and unfettered rise in rents. And honestly, if we're banking on this amendment unleashing a bonanza of new development, I fear we're being simplistic. As was noted, yes, in recent years, permits have dropped 81% in St. Paul, but they've plunged 88% in Minneapolis, 77% in Cincinnati, 68% in St. Louis, 52% in Denver. The list of comparable cities goes on. But outside of our city limits, the real estate industry doesn't have the luxury of blaming rent stabilization for construction challenges. I only have 2 minutes, so as you can read in our commentary in the Star Tribune today, Tram Huang and I lay out some of the real drivers for the slowdown from the industry's own publications and sources. And spoiler alert, it is not rent stabilization. So let's not throw away the long-term affordability protections for thousands of current and future renter households to capitulate to developers who will still be hard-pressed to deliver results.
Thank you very much. Don't forget to sign in. Come on up.
Good afternoon, Councilmember Naker, council members. My name is Scott Cordes. I live in Ward 3, and I'm here on behalf of Project for Pride in Living, a Twin Cities-based community development organization where we operate 1,600 affordable units across the Twin Cities, about a third of which are in St. Paul. PPL has been actively engaged in this discussion going back to the 2022 Rent Stabilization Stakeholder Group, where we participated because we believe that we are that in order to adequately address housing affordability and housing security for the long term, we need both reasonable protections for renters and we need more housing of all types, especially affordable housing. It's well documented, St. Paul and the region has a long-standing housing supply shortage that has been driving up the cost of housing for the better part of 2 decades, dating back to 2008. And St. Paul's rent stabilization ordinance has had the unintended impact of chilling housing development at a time when we need it the most. For example, together with fellow nonprofit affordable housing developer Common Bond Communities, we've been proud to collaborate at Highland Bridge to develop 760 units of affordable housing on 10 parcels. To date, only 3 of those 10 parcels have been or will be under development within the next year. And the other 7 parcels, which would generate over 500 units of additional affordable housing, are on an indefinite pause due to the lack of funding that only becomes available when additional market rate development occurs on the site. We believe this ordinance change will help unlock market rate development across the city, which will in turn generate additional funding to build more affordable housing at Highland Bridge and beyond. Furthermore, pairing this amendment with renter protections included in 2531 provide a reasonable path forward to enhance housing stability throughout the city. We greatly appreciate the Council's consistent support of affordable housing, and we urge approval of this amendment to help ensure we have more people with a more stable place to call home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Don't forget to sign in. Come on up.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Council. My name is Joe Nathan. I've lived in St. Paul, raised 3 children in St. Paul and St. Paul Public Schools, and have 5 granddaughters, all of whom live in St. Paul. I'm here to support the twin approaches that are suggested in these 2 ordinances. A number of years ago, I was asked by the National Governors Association to be in charge of this project. The chair might be especially interested, as with several of you, because one of the things we recommended 40 years ago in 1985 was much more investment in high-quality early childhood education based on considerable research. 1985. I'm a big believer in taking a look at the research. And in the written testimony that I'm submitting, I will ask you to take a look at the first paragraph of a recent piece of research by 2 economists at the University of Southern California. They conclude what has been the result of a well-intended ordinance. The result is, number 1, that the property values in St. Paul have gone down by $1.6 billion. Number 2, the people who have benefited are mostly affluent and white. They conclude the realized impact of this law was the opposite of its intention. I think it was well intended. I think we ought to take a look at what's actually happened. I think the twin approaches are excellent. My colleague, Mr. Rogers, has pointed to the value of having high school kids learn construction skills, which is actually happening in the city as they are building low-income housing. There are things that we can do. We need to take a look at the research, and we need to approve both of these ordinances. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you so much for your time. Don't forget to sign in. Come on up, whoever's next.
Thank you to the City Council for holding this. Welcome to the new City Council member. Appreciate having you. My name is Jacob. I'm a renter from the Como neighborhood. I supported passing rent stabilization. I still support rent stabilization. I would point out that most cities that enact it successfully do so with a new construction exemption. I know that you're going to hear a lot today that to do this is to pass this amendment is to go against the will of the voters who supported the rent stabilization amendment at 53%. I do think St. Paul voters sent a message with the vote on rent stabilization that housing affordability and protecting renters from displacement need to be top priorities of this city council. But those priorities right now are being undermined by our ongoing housing shortage and by the barriers to financing new homes in St. Paul. The truth is that all policies are imperfect. They can all have unintended consequences. And when that becomes clear, it is not a betrayal to amend a policy to better achieve its long-term goals. As elected officials, we rely on you to craft smart policy that makes our priorities a reality. And the current reality is that the current structure of rent stabilization is hurting St. Paul. Average rents in Minneapolis just fell. We are seeing constant property tax problems here in St. Paul that do affect renters too. We are impacted by that as well. With this change, we can bring in new construction that can actually address our long-term affordability crisis. And if we pass it, especially alongside these renter protections, we can still keep renters protected from displacement. This is going to affect 90% of St. Paul is still going to be rent stabilized after this passes, more than 90%. Please pass this amendment. Thank you
very much. Don't forget to sign in. Whoever's next, come on up.
Good afternoon, Council President and members of the City Council. My name is Bea Kyle. I'm the President and CEO of the St. Paul Area Chamber. On behalf of our 1,600 members and affiliates, I'm here to express our support for the proposed amendment to St. Paul's Rent Stabilization Ordinance. This amendment is a necessary step towards addressing the housing shortage in our city. St. Paul was already facing an 11,000 unit housing deficit when the rent stabilization ordinance went into effect. New housing permits have plummeted since then, with the city only issuing 404 permits last year, according to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. St. Paul has ambitious housing plans. The downtown investment strategy envisions tripling the downtown population. Together, the city and chamber are supporting initiatives like the Cub tax credit, the Heights, to bring new energy and housing to our neighborhoods. These efforts depend on private capital, and right now investment is being driven elsewhere. The uncertainty created by the current ordinance continues to make financing projects in St. Paul very difficult. We want to support this amendment as a step in the right direction, though we remain fundamentally concerned about the rent stabilization ordinance as a whole. Our primary interest is policy that advances opportunity, advances growth, and limits risk. Even with the proposed changes, the framework continues to cast a shadow over St. Paul's ability to attract and sustain housing investment. Our members consistently share how this policy limits opportunity, delays growth, and adds risk to projects the city badly needs. Ultimately, we see this amendment as an important course correction. If we want to bring stability and choice to St. Paul residents, we need to expand that housing supply. That begins with a policy environment that invites investment and not one that deters it. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you so much. Don't forget to sign in. Welcome up.
Good afternoon, Council. Thank you for hosting this hearing. My name is Luke Hansen. I live on the 1400 block of Eleanor Avenue in St. Paul. I am one of the members of the board of an organization called Sustain St. Paul that champions abundant housing, low carbon transportation, and sustainable land use. I'm here in my own capacity and on behalf of the organization to speak in support of this proposed amendment to the rent stabilization ordinance. And I want to respond to a notion I've heard from some opponents of the proposed amendment that any changes to the ordinance as it was originally passed by voters in 2021 undermines the will of the voters and is a betrayal of the voters. I don't think that's correct. I think that the outcome of the ballot referendum, as the person before me from the side said, was an expression of the voters' values, the values that the voters care about housing affordability in the city and care about the welfare of tenants. But we have a representative system of government for a reason in St. Paul, and that's that the problems facing our city related to housing, related to the tax base, and a number of issues are complex. And sometimes our local policies don't have the consequences that we don't expect. Voters understand and even expect that our elected representatives, the council, will modify policies when they don't succeed at balancing the complex and sometimes competing priorities that we have as a community. The rent stabilization ordinance is a great example of this. It has caused housing production to plummet in St. Paul in ways that can't be explained by simply by the macroeconomic factors that are affecting Minneapolis and other municipalities in the region. I think that this ordinance is a common sense step towards course correcting. It's a way to ensure that the ordinance will still ensure stability for most tenants in the city while removing the major impediment to housing development. That is essential not only for long-term housing affordability, rents and housing prices, but also for increasing the tax base and reducing the burden that property tax increases are currently having, especially on low-income renters and homeowners. So I urge you to pass the amendment and also the tenant protections that have been proposed. Thank you for your consideration.
Thanks so much. Don't forget to sign in. Welcome up.
So I'm Elaine Terone, Ward 4. Welcome, my new representative. I'm a member of the Metropolitan Council of Interfaith Council on Affordable Housing. I'm hearing that people are behind more affordable housing, especially for working people. I am in favor of the tenant protection part, but I have a lot of questions about the reasons for and the support for the additional exemptions for rent stabilization. And I'm relying today, I just want to make, I have limited time, but Carolyn Stepanski, also Ward 4, spoke earlier, and Trom Huang in today's Star Trib had a very good article that I would urge you all to read very carefully. And one of the things that struck me was their point that there is no peer-reviewed research evidence that rent stabilization slows the development of housing. None. And I'm hearing a lot of people throwing around the idea that it does slow housing, and ideas are not peer-reviewed research. One of the examples that they gave is in Portland, Maine, and this kind of contradicts what was said in the introduction that we had initially, that said that there is absolutely no rent stabilization ordinance that didn't have a no new construction exemption. Apparently, in Portland, Maine, 2020, voters passed the strongest rent stabilization ordinance in the United States. It had no new construction exemption, none. And 3 years later, Portland saw a 10-year high in housing development. Now that's research, it's a fact, it happened. I'm not hearing anybody talk about that. So I have questions, and I urge us to really be focused on what is the outcome. We need more affordable housing.
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in. Welcome up.
Hello, everybody. My name is Joe Byrell. I live in Lower Town in Ward 2. I did submit formal comments to the hearing email address, but I thought I'd show up in person and paraphrase for everybody. I support both of these amendments. I've lived in Lower Town for 7 years. You could argue my wife and I moved in at the height, and we've seen, issues ever since. But we're going to stay for the long haul, and my comments will reflect that. Downtown needs new residents, many, many more residents, as I think everybody agrees. You've all heard the goal of doubling and tripling the population. To achieve that, we need housing downtown. Small, medium, and large, affordable, mid-level, luxury, rental, and resident-owned, all of it. And to get those things built, St. Paul needs investment. And I think we need to relax the stabilization to attract that investment. As some have stated here tonight, and as we've read in the papers, this amendment by itself isn't going to work magic and make it all happen. But I would argue that it's one of the things that need to happen to create the environment to enable it. So I encourage you to support and pass 2529. And I consider the 31 to be the other side of the coin. Rental rights, rental needs are super important. And I think that this amendment looks like a good positive step in the right direction. And so keep an eye on that one as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in and welcome up.
Thank you, council members. My name is Jean Gibbenheim from Ward 4, former renter, former landlord, current homeowner. I'm concerned exemptions on new builds will incentivize tearing down existing rent control apartments. When an existing apartment needs maintenance and upgrades, I'm concerned it may be seen as a better financial move to tear it down and build something new, which won't have rent control. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in and welcome up.
Good afternoon. My name is Braden Holmes, and I'm a cabinet maker and renter on West 7th in Ward 2. Despite the fact that I live in a newly built apartment, I do support the rent stabilization amendment, especially in tandem with the additional tenant protections. I believe that opening the door for new and denser development will be better for St. Paul in the long run and provide more and better options for other folks who are or will be renting within the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in and welcome up.
Hello, my name is Adam Dellinger. I live in North End. I own a house, which is a privilege not shared by half of our citizens. A vote for this ordinance change is a vote to make those people homeless because we will no longer be able to protect them. I don't care, just like what she said, they will just tear down the old buildings and they'll build new ones, and those won't give us our people protections. I voted for this, and the majority of our citizens voted for this. And I read the economic analysis of rent control across the nation when we had this proposal. And the reason I voted for it was because we didn't have the same exemptions that every other city who did this had. Those exemptions in all of the analysis were given as the reason as to why the rent control didn't work for those cities. That's why I voted for this, and it's an assault to us as a democracy to get rid of that because some wealthy landlord or property developer decides that they can't build anymore. They are totally capable of building new housing. You can set rent to whatever you want when you build a new house, a new apartment or anything. And it's just absurd that you can say that you couldn't build. And this is all just ignoring the fact that condos can also be built. And I know there's other issues with that, but the rental housing is not the only kind of housing that we can have in the city, and we already have half of our citizens as renters. We need more opportunities for people to actually live here and stay here, and that's what I think we should do. Council President, you said that we are here seeing democracy happen, but what is happening here now instead is an assault on the democratic will of the people, and I urge you to not capitulate to the whims of a capital strike. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in. Come on up.
Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Harrigas. I live in Ward 4. I'm a St. Paul homeowner, former renter. Welcome, Interim Councilmember Pravatsky. I am also a longtime scholar and writer on the housing crisis, the author of a book, Escaping the Housing Trap, about America's housing crisis. So I'd like to ground my commentary just in a couple kind of big picture ground truths. The housing affordability crisis is everywhere. It is deeply systemic. It is deeply rooted. And when you have a problem like that, you have to do both things. You have to treat the symptoms, you have to manage, the patient's bleeding on the operating table. You also have to treat the underlying cause, which means having a housing market that is responsive to local demand, that can build enough homes for everyone who lives here now and everyone who would like to live here in the future. That includes people like my young children, who I hope will have good options to stay in St. Paul when they are grown. It includes me when I want to downsize and no longer own my home and I want a rental option. And the existing research, the expert understanding of this is, the policy details of how you respond to the housing crisis may be wickedly complex, but there are some basic ground truths. And one is that you cannot meaningfully protect renters in the long run if you don't build. And the reason for this, it's not arbitrary theories about supply and demand. It is that the housing market is a giant game of musical chairs. In the actual game of musical chairs, everyone in the game can be an Olympic caliber sprinter, but if there are not enough chairs for everyone who needs one, someone will lose that game. And the housing market is no different. Under conditions of an overall supply shortage, you cannot meaningfully protect tenants. All you can do is put a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. The people who we need to build housing in St. Paul are telling you that right now they cannot finance these projects, and that is a 5-alarm fire for our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Don't forget to sign in and welcome up.
Hello, my name is Matthew McMillan. I'm from Ward 4 and I oppose this amendment. I oppose it because a permanent exemption from rent control for new construction is insane. If a developer cannot build an apartment building that will be sufficiently profitable within 20 years, then they cannot build a apartment building at all. If they need 25 years of an exemption or 30 years of an exemption, then we should amend the law so that it is 25 years or 30 years. Making it indefinite is just giving landlords, development companies, and capitalists the ability to extract profits indefinitely from their residents, and I see no reason for it. Along with that, it's not necessary. Since 2022, Minneapolis and St. Paul saw similar decreases in new construction, even though Minneapolis doesn't have any rent control, which begs the question, does rent control significantly decrease new construction? It's not obvious that that's the case. So I don't see why it's necessary, and I think that removing rent controls entirely for new construction is far too much and is counterproductive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in. Welcome up.
Good afternoon, City Council members. Thank you for your time. My name is Everett Dalton, and I'm a student at Macalester College, and a recent addition to the St. Paul rental community. Finding adequate and affordable housing as a student is a challenge, so I share Rent Stabilization's core goals of sustaining communities, protecting renters, and keeping housing affordable for those needing it most. but we must be honest about what's working and what's not. Since the ordinance passed, new housing construction has slowed. Rent stabilization is not the only factor, but it has impeded necessary construction. That matters. When housing isn't built, it's renters, students, and working families who are left with fewer options. We've seen that in Minneapolis, increased housing production does lower rent. While not a cure-all, it's a proven tool to advance housing justice. That's why I support new construction exemptions, and I'm glad to see the tenant protections alongside with it. As a student and a renter, I believe these policies achieve true housing justice for St. Paul. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in and welcome up.
Good afternoon, Chair Naker and council members. My name is Brett Bacon. I'm a renter here in Lower Town, and I'm opposed to the ordinance amending the legislative code pertaining to rent stabilization. The ordinance as it exists already falls short of helping most St. Paulites because there's no meaningful enforcement mechanism and there's little guidance to help residents find a way to challenge a rent increase if it exceeds the ordinance's limitations on rent increases. The proposed amendment to forever exempt a considerable chunk of housing from rent stabilization further waters down the original ordinance. The assertion that the existing ordinance exacerbates the affordable housing crisis is dubious. New York City, where I lived for most of the 2010s, had exempted new construction from its strong rent control and stabilization laws. It actually also purportedly incentivized new housing by giving tax credits for new construction, all in the promise for creating more affordable housing. But that affordable housing never came. Simply stated, promises to water down infrastructure that ensures affordable rent will not guarantee an increase in affordable housing supply. Rather than looking to market solutions, the city should use the ordinance as is to ensure that rental units will remain affordable, especially when the country is facing potential runaway inflation from a growing trade war. And that leads to my final point. We all know that the economy right now is extremely volatile. Many economists forecast both a spike in inflation and either a stagnant or shrinking economy. This means that many will lose jobs. All of us will struggle with the costlier needed goods, and the cost of construction materials will rise. That's all to say that we face an environment where people have less money to pay rent, and construction companies will not be able to afford additional supplies to actually build housing. Regardless of whether you think the proposed amended ordinance, may I finish my sentence? Thank you. To consider amending the ordinance as is ill-advised, given market conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in and welcome up.
I thank the council for the time to speak. My name is Adam, and I live at 166 South Snelling Avenue, student at Macalester College. And I rise in strong support of this amendment because of a recent experience with finding housing. So I needed to find housing recently. That meant looking for a new place to rent. But there were not a great deal of landlords to choose from, only two. Supply was limited. And the real effect of this was that we had no bargaining power and ended up paying about $100 more per month than otherwise if we had had more landlords to kind of play off each other. We could eat the loss, but many people cannot. Situations like mine will only become more common if we don't pass the amendment and start increasing the supply of housing, which will again give renters way more power to negotiate with landlords. I agree that older buildings need rent control for a variety of reasons. We cannot hurt the pocketbooks of those who are moving. This amendment does a great job of making a compromise between these prerogatives. And also, I just want to make a quick note about rent control, just because I heard someone talk about like the data backing rent control up. One of the very common effects that rent control does is it reduces mobility, right? So the idea being staying in your current apartment, it's really, really cheap, but moving is really expensive. So if your landlord is, not really keeping up the building very well, then, you're kind of stuck where you are. You can't move. And so really when we're talking about rent control, we're talking about making people more free to move around, to escape bad landlords. And yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Make sure to sign in and welcome up.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is John Benda. I'm a resident of Ward 3. Years ago, when I began my teaching career on a modest salary, I was a renter for a number of years. as was my spouse. Both of our children have also been renters, and our grandchildren will no doubt be renters someday as well. Everyone, no matter what their race, income, or zip code, should have a safe and stable place to live. So if they're renters, they should have predictable, manageable rent increases, especially during these precarious times, and particularly for those with low incomes, fixed incomes, or in affordable housing. That's why I think the rent stabilization ordinance is critical. I do understand, though, that St. Paul has an extreme shortage of housing that needs to be addressed, and that exempting new construction from rent stabilization has been targeted as a way to accelerate the building of more housing. What puzzles me is that this ordinance exempts new construction from rent stabilization indefinitely, like forever. That's a large number of years, like an infinite number. In calculus terms, it's 1 over x as x goes to 0 large. I'm not trying to be unserious here. I am totally serious. I know the City Council is too. It really seems like a 20-year exemption with a 20-year look-back should be more than sufficient. But if not, I ask that you please put a cap on the number of years. How about 25 or 30, but not infinity? That truly is unserious. That way my grandchildren and all of today's children can have stable, predictable, and manageable rent increases. This alternative proposal would allow developers and investors to make their profits, but ensure that as many renters as possible in St. Paul can be protected under rent stabilization. I sincerely hope that the city's desire that developers will build more housing as a result of this ordinance comes to pass. If that doesn't occur, I expect that the city will revisit this issue and explore what adjustments need to be made to better balance our commitment to housing supply and housing equity. Thanks for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in and welcome up.
Hello, my name is Mateo. I'm a renter in Ward 1. I'm also a graduate student at the University of Minnesota, and I study housing, and I'm here to oppose to this amendment. Last week, the entire staff of the Low-Income Heating Energy Assistance Program were terminated. Thousands of low-income households that depend on federal assistance to pay their utility bills will no longer receive those funds. We're all aware of the federal forces pressuring us, and at a time when we're going to see an increase in inflation, bills, construction costs, and decreased assistance from our federal government, municipalities should actually be doing everything in their power to protect constituents, to help us use all their tools at their disposal to help us stay in our homes. And yet here we are talking about amending an ordinance that actually helps us stay in our homes. The same city who a few years ago passed one of the most incredible rent control ordinances is now capitulating to developers who want to extract even more profits from St. Paul renters. St. Paul renters already have high burdens. 1 in 4 St. Paul renters pay over half their income to rent. And these pains are not felt equally. Only 16% of Ward 4 renters pay half their income, but 1 in 3 Ward 7 renters pay half their income to rent. This amendment is asking too much of us. It's asking us to give up long-term affordability in exchange for no guarantees. And you're gaslighting us into thinking it's a good deal by dangling tenant rights in front of our faces. We should not have to give up affordability for tenant rights that should already be ours. This is absolutely a supply issue. It's a property tax issue. It's a downtown issue. But rent control is not the cause of those problems. We want to work with you to address these challenges. We do. Let's develop housing ourselves. Let's get rid of surface parking lots and build more housing and businesses. I beg you, we can do this ourselves, but we can't do this if we abandon renters. Please vote against this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in. Come on up.
Chair and members of the council, thank you for hosting this item today. My name is Merritt, and I live in downtown St. Paul, lifetime resident and a renter, owner, and proud to be here today listening to all of the passionate and smart comments on both sides. I'm a career city planner, including 11 years in St. Paul, where I worked hard to reduce regulations and amend zoning to make building housing as easy as possible, including a master plan to add thousands of housing units at Highland Bridge, with a significant number of them affordable. I think everyone in this room cares about housing choice and affordability, sentiments that voted the voter referendum on rent stabilization and tenant protections. It's a well-intentioned idea, but it doesn't work in our housing market system. Developers and investors have many choices about where to sell their housing product in this region and across the U.S. In this region alone, there are at least 70 other communities with infrastructure and zoning that welcome multifamily development but don't have rent stabilization rules. Rent stabilization is having the opposite effect of its intention. It isn't increasing the supply of reasonably priced housing. Instead, it's suppressing new housing production, which chokes supply and drives up prices over the long term. Across the country, the places that have been most successful in addressing the housing price crisis are those that are meeting demand with robust supply. St. Paul must do everything it can to encourage housing development, not drive it away with rules that nobody else has. I am strongly and perhaps desperately in support of exempting new housing development from the rent stabilization terms. We've seen the devastating effect that it's already had on housing production in the city, and we cannot let that continue. More housing strengthens our economy and gives renters more choice and power in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in and welcome up.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to all of us. My name is Jessica Szyminski, and I am a policy attorney at the Housing Justice Center located in Lowertown, and I'm also a former renter in Ward 4. I have been really glad to see that this council is continuing to enhance and support rent stabilization, but we, as the Housing Justice Center, are fundamentally opposed to the creation of a permanent exemption looking forward. I've been disappointed today by the amount of scapegoating that rent stabilization has received regarding the lack of development. If rent stabilization were truly the cause, we wouldn't be having the same rates all around the metro area in Anoka County, Washington, Dakota. Everywhere the rates are down, and none of them have rent stabilization. There is fundamentally a difference between a correlation and a causation. Sure, there's so many factors that participate in this that we can't say rent stabilization is the cause. And another important point that I wanted to point out is that by creating a permanent exemption moving forward, we are going to categorically exclude most of the accessible housing in St. Paul, and that the folks who need accessibility in their housing will be shut out from the possibility of rent stabilization protections. The ADA housing started building, like those protections started in 1991, and so if we consider that anything after 2005 is excluded, that's only 13 years of housing development that folks with disabilities will have access to that have rent stabilization protections. And that will never change if we continue to exclude it as a permanent deadline. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in and welcome up.
Hey, good afternoon, Council President Naker, Council. My name is Kevin Gallatin. I live in Ward 3, 1822 Highland Parkway. I support both the amendment to rent stabilization as well as the tenant protections ordinance. We need more housing, more residents, more housing choices, and we need more tax revenue. Getting all of that often takes public investment, and we need those TIF districts to pay off, such as at my neighborhood, Highland Bridge, where over $50 million in public investments have been made in infrastructure alone, and we need revenue to pay that off. We need the development to proceed. We should remove barriers to private investment in our city to help to meet those needs. New housing lowers costs for everyone by filtering to people of all incomes. That's the musical chairs that another gentleman mentioned. That lowers costs approximately 1.9% a year, according to hard data from Syracuse University. We're all aware that property taxes are increasingly burdening all residents. This amendment could encourage adaptive reuse of downtown buildings, which is critical for our fiscal health. I do think it's really noteworthy that it's the certificate of occupancy that determines whether they'd be exempted, not when they're built. So some of those old buildings that are currently Class B, Class C office buildings that are vacant could be repurposed as residential, and this amendment could help encourage that adaptive reuse. Lastly, I'll just note that the rent stabilization ordinance today and as originally envisioned, it allows landlords to pass along higher property taxes directly to renters without limitation. So over time, if we don't address our continued property tax issues, we are going to continue to see a higher share of renters' monthly payments being property tax generated. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Make sure to sign in and welcome up.
Michelle Molstead, Ward 1 resident and Sustained St. Paul board member. Thank you, Councilmember Necker and Council for the time, and welcome, Councilmember Pravatsky. I'm a little nervous because I'm having some really bad calculus flashbacks, so thanks a lot. I supported rent stabilization, and I support this ordinance, which feels a little weird. But good governance is about making adjustments without fully abandoning values. Ordinance 2529 helps St. Paul become a nicer, friendlier jurisdiction for home builders while protecting renters. When I moved here, I asked people, how long should I say I'm new here? And the answers ranged from 10 years to the rest of your life. As others have said, we all hope, I hope we all hope that St. Paul can be a city where people want to stay even after 11 years and always have the option to stay and call home. I support this ordinance, and I hope you do too, along with the tenant protection ordinance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Make sure to sign in and welcome up.
Good afternoon, Council President, City Council members. My name is Melissa Wenzel, and I live at 7th and Michigan. Yes, that's where I live. And I am a homeowner. I've been a renter most of my adult life. I just moved a little while ago. I urge you to permanently exempt rental developments and those built since 2005 from the rent stabilization ordinance. We need to focus our priorities on expanding our city housing supply while strengthening tenant protection, ensuring that renters are treated with fairness and dignity. It's no secret, at least to me, that the initial rent stabilization ordinance passing in 2022 had unintended chilling effect on housing development. Since then, our housing stock has stalled while demand continues to grow. This limited supply is contributing to rising rents and increased competition for very few available units. If we want St. Paul to be a city where people of all incomes can live and thrive, we must encourage the development of new housing while also safeguarding renters from instability and discrimination. This ordinance ensures that new construction, which brings much needed housing and increased property tax revenue, won't be disincentivized. Increased rental units often have lowered costs. And as we've seen in Minneapolis, without rent stabilization limitations, rents have been stable and have gone down. We owe it to our renters to do what is needed to increase rental stock, which will allow for more choices, stable or lowered rents, and more people living in our wonderful city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in. Welcome up. And I'm just going to do a quick call. If you are here to speak on this item, it would be great if you could line up just so we have a sense of how many more folks we have to speak. So this would be your opportunity to line up. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Councilmember Naker and the rest of the City Council, and welcome to my new City Council member. I am a Ward 4 resident. I'm Ginny DeLuca, and I'm a leader with Isaiah. I've been a homeowner here for 34 years, but I'm here to speak against the proposed new construction amendment. I love the city, and I loved hearing how all of you love this city earlier on this today, that you care for the people that live here. And I also care for the people that live here too. And I want people to live here in a safe environment with a place to call home with no exceptions. And I have been listening to all these conversations, and what I hear in my head is profit and greed. And I call St. Paul home. My house is my home. And at some point, I know, because I have a 112-year-old bungalow and the stairs are really difficult to climb up, I'm going to sell that house, and I'm going to want to live in a rental unit. I want to have an elevator. I want it to be new, shiny and new after 112 years of living in the house I live in. And I respect that City Council and the mayor are between a rock and a hard place. You've got all of our organizations possibly wanting to keep this amendment, possibly against this amendment, and developers breathing down your neck because they want to have an unlimited infinity exemption on housing. I think that's wrong. I would be willing to compromise on that, though, maybe 25, 30-year exemption on this. I can't imagine they can't earn a profit in that amount of time. And right now,
we know that there are many residents here in St. Paul who are cost burdened. And if this exemption goes through, it's going to affect those of lower income and those who are seniors who are on a fixed income. So whichever path you all choose to go to, I hope you get assurances from developers that they will develop more buildings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in and welcome up.
Good afternoon, folks. My name is Jess Corner. I'm a resident of Ward 7, Dayton's Bluff, the old wrecked building sort of neighborhood. This was my first city council meeting ever, so I don't really know how these things are supposed to go. And I prepared a really nice, eloquent statement that had a lot of facts and data and all that good stuff. But I'm not going to read that, because what I'm hearing from your constituents on both sides is two different realities. There are people saying that building condos is going to fix everything that's wrong with St. Paul, and there are people saying that infinite growth forever is really terrible and going to break St. Paul. What I would ask from this council is that you go into these sort of sessions with your minds open, and you determine what those metrics are and what those data sources are that are true and speak to what you think your voters' values are. Personally, I'm going to go with the person who works in housing justice, who said that this would be a disaster. And I agree with that, because based on the language of this amendment, having exemptions only for people who can afford to build large new places is kind of counter to the interest of pretty much everyone else. So I also want to say, just for the obviously old white women and men who are here representing their development companies or whatever conglomerate they've assembled, that this also is a big middle finger to every single small landlord who has renovated and loved their buildings. What about the character of St. Paul and our beautiful history here? And that's something that should resonate with everyone, regardless of where you stand politically. So I would ask that you take those things into consideration. And also want to note, Ward 4, you were not elected, you're interim, correct? I would encourage you to reserve a vote on something as contentious on this, and maybe abstain. Thank you very much for your time.
Appreciate your time. Make sure you sign in. Welcome up. I think you're next.
Hello, council members, and thank you, Council President, for your time. My name is Cole Hansen. I'm a Ward 4 resident. I'm a dad. I'm a renter, and I give half my public salary to my landlord every single month. I wanted to speak to fairness as a part of this amendment, because I think it is fundamentally unfair to renters like myself, as well as the small landlords and folks trying to build housing in this or maintain housing in the city. They're investing time and time again in older properties. I live in Ward 4. I live at Fairview University, and I go for a lot of runs through the south part of the ward and see all the nice old buildings along Marshall, along Summit Avenue, and I see all the nice old buildings in St. Anthony Park near Raymond, and those buildings would be prime targets to be torn down so that way new developments could be built, rent could be set at wherever they want it to be, and that's where it would be forever. In my building and buildings like mine, I benefit from income-controlled housing, but if you don't, you benefit from rent stabilization. You don't have to worry that your public salary won't raise every year by 3% or more to match your rent. That is the reality for those of us who work for the public. My salary is not going up 6% a year like my retirement would too. So making sure that our rent matches with what we are actually living with day to day as public employees, as renters in this community, as parents, people just trying to get by. I ask you to consider fairness for those of us who are trying to make this work. I'd also ask fairness for the property owners who are investing in older properties, who are trying to do their best to do right by our city. I was taught that it's always cheaper to keep what you have than find something new. And I think this city has an opportunity here to keep a lot of good that we already have, instead of insisting on every moment trying to build something new. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Make sure to sign in. Welcome up.
Good evening, Council President, members of the St. Paul City Council. My name is Cecil Smith. I'm President and CEO of the Minnesota Multi-Housing Association, known as MHA. MHA is an industry nonprofit representing 2,300 members with 320,000 units of housing in the state, serving 600,000 renters. I'm here today to offer MHA's support for the proposed Ordinance 2529, but also provide some unsolicited advice. The vast majority of economists, including Paul Krugman, raise red flags about rent control for one simple reason: it does not work. But here we are again, fixing a broken policy. Now, this amendment may actually help generate new development, and so we encourage you to adopt Ordinance 2529 because St. Paul desperately needs new housing. But let me tell you a story from this morning. I was at a capital markets meeting with industry leaders from Chicago. There is $325 billion of liquid capital in this country currently looking to invest in multifamily. As was stated at this meeting, the first underwriting criteria for this $325 billion is now regulatory risk, in particular, rent control. In other words, they look at markets without rent control. I can tell you from personal interactions with National Investment Capital that the presence of rent control in St. Paul has had a negative effect on the entire metro and even the state. It is impossible to measure what might have been for our housing in this region, and even for St. Paul, if you had not had rent control during the most recent building boom. But the real estate cycle will return to development and redevelopment, especially with $325 billion of liquidity. Will St. Paul be ready? Will you repeal rent control? That is the real solution, and we urge you to take action. Thank you.
Thank you. Make sure to sign in and welcome up.
Hi, my name is Steve Tuckner. I am a resident of Ward 5. I'm a homeowner, former renter, I guess I could say. So in 2021, the 3% rent stabilization initiative was passed by the voters. It was intended to allow the renters to plan their lives with certainty of how much housing will cost them now and in the future. It was not a developer profit stabilization initiative. A year later, this certainty was gutted through a set of exceptions passed by the City Council. Now we are here again to try to further weaken rent control the voters passed. This time at the behest of a large developer, the Ryan Companies, who is slow-walking the Highland Bridge development in the hopes of killing rent stabilization. The Ward 4 temporary appointment shenanigans is further evidence of what will be done to subvert the will of the voters. The next time there's an initiative up for a vote in St. Paul, why should voters consider voting at all, knowing their wishes will be ignored? At a time where we are wondering about the strength of our democracy nationally, we must do our best to maintain our democracy locally and reject this rent control amendment.
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in. Welcome up.
Thank you, Madam President. My name's Ferdinand Peters. I am from the Fighting Fourth Ward, and I'm very proud to finally have representation on this council by Matt Pravratsky. Thank you, and thank you for voting tonight for the short time that you'll be here, giving up your entire summer, I see, sir. That's good. So, and I saw Cole was here already, and I know he's one of the people that's running, and I thought he made some very good comments. I have been a renter in St. Paul. I've been a property owner. I represent as an attorney many, many property owners who are small landlords. And I know a lot of tenants. And some of those people are scared because even though the first speaker tonight for the public hearing talked about how she was scared out of her wits with the threats for a person allowed in a property that shouldn't have been, I think number 31 ordinance, which you're going to talk about later, is tied in to what we're talking about now. You can't keep them separate. You've got to protect the small landlords in the city. You proudly showed in one of the presentations all of the housing in St. Paul that's not going to be affected by this ordinance, that exempts any rent increases or exempts any problem with rent increases. You got to understand, when I was in the Army, infantry, when we made a decision, we realized there'd be unintended consequences of every decision we made. We called those first order effects and second order effects. We got to be careful because what you do is going to hurt all the areas you showed in the inner city. There are people that choose to live in smaller buildings. They feel safe there. They can walk. The walkability in those buildings is great to grocery stores and other things. Did I use up all my time, sir? Okay, please, give me that card and I'll hold on. Okay. But anyway, a lot of you council members don't know me. The president does know me. I have had to sue this council many times, the city many times, and I've always won. And I've never enjoyed it because I live here, I pay taxes here, and I really would rather lose. One thing you need to do, because there is an equal protection argument if you pass this ordinance, you have great city attorneys.
And now you are at time.
Get a legal opinion, please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a winning argument to listen. No, I'm just kidding. Come on up, and I think we are a few more speakers close to the end of our public hearing on this item. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Lucid. I live in Ward 2 on Morton and Ottawa. People have brought up a lot of stuff today. I guess what I want to talk about is the type of housing that will get built from this amendment. I have no faith that it will be affordable for the people who are already living here, especially considering the fact I've talked about this building before, but the Union Flats building in Ward 4, you should check it out. Built in 2019, water damage throughout the whole building. You walk into the entrance, the carpet is in a disgusting state. There's mold growing on it. I was talking to residents from there. They've had cracked windows that have taken a year for them to fix. So saying that a property management like that can indefinitely increase the rent is very disrespectful to those renters. Also, the people who will be building, I saw that Common Bond got mentioned. I've been to the Torrey San Miguel, 6-minute drive from here. They are, at least the way they manage that property is laughable. If those are the people who are gonna be building, I have no faith that they will respect the residents who live there, that they will do timely repairs. So I would just really ask you to think about, like, who is building? Have you talked to renters under properties owned by those places? What have their experiences been? Because, yeah, the people who live at the Torrey San Miguel, water comes through the windows while it rains. You see tiles torn up in the hallway. There's abandoned property there that people were going into and out, and Common Bond didn't do anything about it. So if those are the people building, I don't want it. So,
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in, and welcome up.
Hello, City Council. Thank you for inviting us. A word of caution, I'm coming off back surgery. I'm a little medicated, so I'm a little unsteady. But my words are, I'm here to represent the senior, disabled, veteran communities. I'm here personally to support part of this ordinance. I was one of the guys on the committee for rent stabilization. I see this as a livable document. People don't like it. They're never going to like it. But there can always be changes that helps everybody. It's called a mediation. Right now, you have, like this gentleman just mentioned, property owners that are lackadaisical in their upkeep of the properties that we live in. There's going to also be our kids, our grandkids that's going to be looking for affordable housing, and they're going to need protections also. I was a 2-time elected board member from WESCO, Westside Community Organization. My name is Marcus Troy. I'm a Black Student Union president at Minneapolis College, and so I have access to all the clubs there. I mentioned at one of my talks here, renters are now looking to unionize, and that's additional protections we feel we need that the city council might not provide, but we're still willing to work with the city council to help maintain our protections. We're not going anywhere, regardless of what obstacles you put in our place. Generational renters, our kids, our grandkids. You saw a slide up here where you had certified occupants. What's going to happen? There was a small percentage that they disappeared. Those numbers are going to come back up. So like I said, you're always going to have renters. We're always going to need protections. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Don't forget to sign in. I hope you feel better too. Welcome up.
Madam President, City Council, my name is John Slade. I live in Ward 7, and I'm the senior organizer for the Metropolitan Interfaith Council on Affordable Housing. There's a couple of folks who were here when we fought to get the rent stabilization passed, and it's been a battle with big money the whole time. Ryan Companies makes about $1.8 billion a year. They manage about $8 billion in properties. They put $300,000 into the anti-campaign, and they have continued and continued and continued to slow walk or undermine and Councilmember Jost, I know that this Ford, I've been working at MICA for about 20 years, and so the Ford plant and the redevelopment has been a long, slow, hard fight. There's a lot of TIF going into that, and I think that Ryan is trying to, as other folks have said, slow walk this to get this thrown out, to get this taken out. Madison Equities, screwed my city, and you've got most of that downtown. I just think it's really interesting listening to folks because everybody professes to want renters to have a great life. I remember before rent control when we didn't have enough affordable rental and the market was free and we put a small control on it and they freaked out and this is what we got. Chuck was at Marone, was writing about housing and strong towns. And I went and I got the internet now, I could look this up. We need to move away from a model where large developers and centralized financial institutions have unprecedented sway over what is built and where. That's what we got in this country. That's what my historic city council needs to say, yeah, we can pick up and we can make a change. I urge you to not support this.
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in and welcome up.
Good afternoon, Madam President. So let me take this opportunity to say welcome my new City Council member, Maulid Mohammed from Isaiah, also resident in Ward 4, who never owned a house. So I don't know how owners think, but the experience that I have was I'm a renter of one of the buildings that the gentleman mentioned, Union. I'm at the other side, which is Bill Perry Apartments. It's new. 2019. And the corporate greed is what we are talking about today, which is if you need more housing, give us an indefinite access to have to waive the rent, the new permit exemption. The policy they have is if you have a broken element in your house, they will never fix it. I had a 1 year, my dishwasher was not working. I've complained a lot. When I even talk to my city council member, they will tell you we have those complaints and we have nothing to do with it. In that building, I think we have almost 100 units. We, as the East African community, we are large communities. They have 5 3-bedrooms. The rest are 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom. This new project, new building coming up, I guarantee you, they will even have 1 3-bedrooms. Well, that will leave us. That will leave us nowhere. The rent stabilization, the idea is they are not fixing the maintenance. Is they want you to get out so that they can increase the next tenant. My rent was, when I was coming in 2019, was $1,300. Right now, I pay $2,000. $2,000. So I'm supporting the idea of let's meet halfway. 30 years, 25 years, and let's see how that also works. I agree the idea of also let's sit down who the developers are and find out who are they managing their properties.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Make sure to sign in and welcome up.
Good afternoon. My name is Jareth Buto, and I live in the Lower Town neighborhood. I
was a homeowner in St. Paul, raised my children here, and then my husband and I sold our home and came downtown St. Paul to live it up. So we did that for a number of years until I got sick, and we are renters. We were renters. And my husband died in a rental unit, in a lovely rental unit. And I am still in that building, and I love it. I love a lot of things about it, but it has become unaffordable, and I had wanted to die in the same apartment that my husband had, but I couldn't because the rent was too much. And so every year, the rent goes up 3%, and I can live with that, but what happens in the meantime is that the landlords also added more utilities that we had to pay for that were not included when we first signed the lease. Every year there seems to be another utility that we have to pay for, or the parking goes up, or the storage units go up, or something goes up in those situations. And I'm going to be 80 in 2 weeks, so I live on a limited income. You know, I'm not going to be out there working 20 or 25 hours of work to make hours a week to make ends meet. And so I trusted when I voted for this that the government would live up to that promise. And now I see that eating away, and I see landlords and I don't trust them. I don't trust that they will not raise rents or go around the corners or try to do stuff because they are business people. They are not there for just the goodwill of the community. They are there for business. So I don't trust them, so I am opposed to this. And if you still want to do it, then for goodness sakes, don't have it for eternity.
Thank you very much. And an early happy birthday. Don't forget to sign in. Welcome up.
City Council, Madam President, I'm Scott Hesselgrave. I live on the east side now. I grew up on Grand Avenue in my dad's fiveplex, learning how to take care of a small little community until the last day of 7th grade when I climbed out the in-school detention window and we left St. Paul, not to look back until after college when I finally came back to help my sister with her house. Now I live on the east side, like I said. I voluntarily subsidized affordable housing until 2020 when y'all came after my boundaries. That's the next one. But NOAA, naturally occurring affordable housing. That's what happens with a free market. I kept rents really low so that I wouldn't have turnovers, so that I could just, I wasn't greedy. And then in 2020, we get all of these Marxists saying that landlords are greedy. Well, check it out. This is selfishness now, the opposite. I revoked half of my supply. I only have 5. They're not in my name because a family member helped me finance it 20 years ago. But 20 years I kept them low turnover and back to back the next day rented again. And now, since 2020, 50%. Because you're just assaulting property and contract rights. Life, liberty, and property almost made it into the Declaration of Independence until the Second Continental Congress, like y'all, negotiated, and they replaced it with pursuit of happiness instead of property, because property enables us to pursue our happiness, because that's how we build our generational wealth in America. And everybody has a duty in America to own your piece of the pie. Renting is simply one step on the ladder, but this has had a Hegelian dialectic effect.
Thank you, sir. You're at time.
People raise their rents $200 just to survive the egregious property tax increases.
Thank you, sir. You're at time. I'm going to need you to wrap up. Thank you very much.
If they took that away,
appreciate it.
I'd drop the rents.
Thank you. Make sure to sign in and welcome up.
Hi, my name is Brent Holmes, and I just wanted to share a couple things about my experience. Hopefully it'll help the council as you plan for the future. But I think rent control does have a suppression on asset value and real estate taxable value. I think that, as an example, in August of 2021, my partners and I put under contract a $15 million portfolio of brownstones, sort of in the Highland, Mac-Groveland area. The actual purchase price was $14,820,000, I think. That was August. In October, the appraisal came back above $16 million. When rent control passed, our lenders required that it was reappraised because they wanted to reassess the risk. And the new appraisal came back at around $12.5 million, specifically because of rent control. Everything else was the same. I'm sorry?
Just testify to us. Thank you.
Okay. And so when we closed we had to close the property at the purchase price and not walk away from it. Otherwise, we would have had lost $200,000 of hard earnest money. And so we had this experience. The whole yield curve rose since then, and a lot of macroeconomic things have happened since then, further suppressing asset value. But recently, we've had hundreds of thousands of dollars of tax refunds from our apartments. Our values of apartments, we own around 1,000 units, maybe 1.5% of the 65,000. We've lost, millions of dollars of write-downs in tax value. While on my house, I own a 1,400 square foot house, and my taxes went up 20% on that. So I think we're going to have maybe another 3 years of suppression of value. I think it'll be 7 years until apartment values outside of St. Paul go back up to where they were at their peak. So I think we're in this big transition. And just for your budget,
You are at time.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in. Welcome up. Just as a reminder, you can always submit public testimony via writing if you feel like you ran out of time to say what you had to say. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you so much, City Council. Everyone who's here, here's what I'm going to use a minute of my time for. Are there any developers or representatives of developers here who are willing to go on record and say, yes, if this goes through, then I will absolutely 100% create affordable housing? I'm going to roll a minute of my own time here. If you're here, go for it. 1 minute. We're going to sit in silence until one of you comes through. I'm recording. Anyone? Wow. I thought you were going to jump up. But let's sit.
Okay.
Not the question.
We're not going to have a back and forth, so you can use your time to speak or not, but...
They could stand.
Okay. Are you done with your testimony?
No. I have the floor. I have 22 seconds left. Because this silence is part of my testimony. So let's sit in it together. 3, 2, 1. Wow. Huh. That's interesting. That silence is deafening. Time's up. Sign out. Bye. I'm sorry. My time isn't up.
Okay. Are you done testifying to us, sir? Because you still have 7 seconds. Okay. Thank you so much. Please sign in. Welcome up.
Hello to the council, President. This is one of the first times I'm doing something like this in St. Paul. My name is Melissa. I have a safe address, so that's all I'm going to say. And I have lived experience. My biggest concern is that one of the fastest growing populations of people who are going homeless are people at age 55 and above, single women who don't have the opportunity to actually have a voice, and people who've been estranged. They can't be here to represent today a huge population of people. And when it comes to trying to keep up with these ordinances, they're not here. They don't know what's going on. There's very, very little representation. And even when you do get housing, trying to keep it, I've been in a population where there's 151,000 people who are homeless and don't know how to get through this system. It is so important to actually stand up and represent this issue. It's literally like fighting for your life. And with that, I want to say that a lot of the monies that are taken for these causes to build more quality, affordable housing, although I've been very fortunate to be in some places that it is affordable, they're a very small percentage of apartments within very large units, ultimately, that secure the monies. And then those units, ultimately they still go up in pricing in some way, and they also don't cover for the disabled. So with that, I will say thank you, but please, please do consider the need.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in. And this is the last call. Is there anyone else here tonight who would like to testify on this issue?
This ordinance or this issue?
I'm sorry, this ordinance, 2529. Thank you. All right, thank you all so much for your testimony. I will look to my colleagues to see if there are any comments around the table. As I mentioned, we will be laying this matter over until May 7th, and we will be leaving the public hearing open until then for further comments, so feel free to submit them, but looking around the table to see if there's any comments now. Ms. Yang.
Well, I just want to say generally, thank you so much to everybody who took the time to be here. We have also received lots of comments through email and calls too, so that's a part of the agenda here. And I look forward to more conversations with folks, especially those who live in my ward. We still have a few more weeks to go before the final vote, so appreciation for everybody here.
Thanks, Ms. Yang. Any other comments? Ms. Jost.
I'll just really quick say, as one of the sponsors of this resolution, I really appreciate everyone that showed up today. I think we heard from a wide range of folks from all across the city, and I want to thank you for taking your time out of your day to be here, and we will be digesting all of this information over the next few weeks here, and just really appreciate your participation.
Thanks, Ms. Jost. All right, I will add my thanks to everyone for taking the time. I know it was a lot of time. Please know that it really matters to us to hear from you, both again in here and if you choose to submit testimony. I think what you've heard tonight and what you've said tonight really helps paint the picture of the complexity of this issue and also of the full range of views that our community holds on this. So thank you for taking time to show up and share your perspective. I'm going to suggest before we have a staff report on our next item that my colleagues and I take a... I am so sorry. We are going to take a motion from Ms. Jost to lay the matter over until May 7th and continue the public hearing. Continue the public hearing till May 7th. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is continued to May 7th.
And as you can tell, I think all of us, at least I, could use a moment to just stand and stretch before we go into the next item. So I'm going to suggest that my colleagues and I take a moment to do that if you would like to. And to anyone else here, if you'd like to stand and stretch before we move on to the next item.
Call the city council back from recess. Roll call, please. Kim?
Here.
Pravatsky?
Here.
Yang?
Here.
Bowie?
Here.
Johnson?
Here.
Jost?
Here.
Council President Naker? Here. 7 present, no one absent. Item 25 is the public hearing of ordinance 25-31, creating Chapter 193 of the Legislative Code pertaining to tenant protections. Thanks so much to everyone for allowing us all to take that much needed break. Hopefully we're back extra sharp focused for our next really important piece of legislation that we're considering tonight. And again, we have a staff report from Director Weesey. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good evening. Angie Weesey, Director of Safety and Inspections. So I'm going to walk through the ordinance as proposed, and definitely will have time for questions if you have them. So just to overview, the different sections are security deposits and prepaid rent, applicant screening, written notice for non-payment, notice of sale, relocation assistance, and then the complaint process and penalties. DSI will administer the ordinance, but OFE in the ordinance is tasked with creating some of the educational materials and other resources in the city's LEP languages. So starting with security deposits and prepaid rent, for security deposits, they're limited to 1 month's rent, and then prepaid rent is also limited to 1 month's rent. There is an exception that if a tenant would be screened out for the landlord's tenant screening criteria, they can require an additional month's rent as kind of a offsetting of that risk. For the tenant screening, there's 2 options, but really the big thing is about transparency and disclosure. So that applies to both. So starting out with that, the screening criteria has to be presented and made available to the applicant. And there's really 2 options here. So there's the uniform criteria, which was really prescriptive and lays out the different elements that can be screened, and they're related to credit history, rental history, and criminal record. And option 2 is to have an individual assessment. And again, in both cases, they have to be made available to the applicant. And in both cases, applicants have to be provided the opportunity to supply additional information or to correct something when presented with it. There is an exception in this, and that's just related to local, state, or federal funding or loan requirements, and we don't control, let's say, the HUD rules for tenant screening, and therefore there's an exception related to that. This also includes a merging of 2 chapters, Chapter 54 and this new Chapter 193. And so there's 3 additional things that were in Chapter 54 which are being added into this. And that's the cost for the application fee cannot exceed the cost to process the actual screening. The collection of the fees, so they can collect the application fee, but they can't actually cash it or deposit it unless they actually do the screening. So if there are people in front of them in line that need to be screened, they just essentially hold that fee until they need it, and if they don't need it, it needs to be returned. And then the last is transparency. So any denial needs to come with the name of the screening agency or the credit reporting agency. So under the uniform screening criteria, you can see here, this is the short version. The list is much longer if you read the entire ordinance, but arrest charge that didn't result in a conviction, and these are good things that you cannot screen for. So it's essentially like a list of things you cannot do. Participation in or completion of a diversion program, court file that's been expunged or destroyed or is not public, convictions that were vacated, expunged, or stayed, convictions for crimes that are no longer legal in Minnesota, juvenile convictions, non-criminal petty misdemeanor offenses, misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor offenses which are over 3 years old, felony convictions over 7 years old with an exclusion, and then specific felony convictions that are over 10 years old. And the specific actual laws that those pertain to are listed out in the ordinance. For credit and rental history, cannot screen out for credit score by itself or insufficient credit history. And the exception to that is if the insufficient credit history is being withheld in bad faith. For rental history, cannot disallow for a pending eviction action, any eviction that has not resulted in a vacate judgment, eviction action that's more than 3 years old, insufficient rental history, again, unless it's being withheld in bad faith. And if there is an income test utilized by the landlord, they must also allow the tenant to demonstrate a history of successful rent payments. And this is something that has come up through conversation about people prioritizing rent payments over some of their other bills, and that credit history might not be the full picture on being able to commit to a rent payment. For the individualized screening, this is, if they're going to use more prohibitive screening than what I just laid out, they have to consider all the supplemental evidence related to the screening. Essentially, things happen in our lives, and if there are some justifications or some extenuating circumstances or any other things that can offset that individual screening criteria, they need to be able to present that to the landlord for consideration. When it comes to denials, so before denying an application for criminal history, landlord must consider supplemental evidence. The landlord also needs to notify the applicant within 14 days of rejecting the application and identify the specific criteria related to the denial. So that denial notification, again, within 14 days, the basis, and this is for the individualized screening, and then any supplemental evidence and why it did not adequately compensate for what was found in the landlord's determination. And they do have to retain, landlords are required to retain that notification for 2 years. So moving on to the affordable housing definitions, and this really relates specifically to notice of sale and a protection period when there's a sale of a property. So to do that, first we need to define what an affordable housing building is related to this ordinance specifically. So that's any building where at least 20% of the units are affordable housing units. So going on to define what an affordable housing unit is, a rental unit in an affordable housing building that rents for an amount no more than 1/3 of 60% or below of area median income, and gives the specifics of where we find that area median income. These are both really important because you could look at, do a Google search for affordable housing or affordable housing building, and you're going to find probably 15 different definitions. And so it's really important that we define what it means for this policy. Next is written notice for non-payment of rent. At least 30 days before an eviction action alleging non-payment of rent or other unpaid financial obligation, the landlord must provide written notice to the tenant. And I do want to be clear that this is only for non-payment of rent. It is not a carte blanche 30-day notice for a rent eviction, eviction notice. And it's specific about non-payment. And really this is about transparency and giving the tenant an opportunity to pay the amount. So total amount due, the accounting for the amount due, the address and location of the online location, since a lot of landlords use like a payment portal now, so where to submit the rent. And then there's some prescribed language that is provided so that renters know where they can get assistance should they need it. They have to deliver that notice either personally or first-class mail. So, notice of sale. This is for affordable housing buildings and the affordable housing units in those buildings. So all have to be noticed of the sale. So to notify those units who their new owner is. There is a protection period. It is 3 months, and the protection period needs to address, or the notice has to address these items. So, well, start out with that they cannot terminate a tenant's agreement without cause. This says not renew, but they cannot renew a tenant agreement without cause. It's a double negative. But they cannot raise rent, cannot rescreen the tenants without giving required notice and paying relocation assistance. That's the key here. So they could do all of these things, but they have to provide notice and they have to provide relocation assistance. Is a different way to say that. This last line here is what's required also to be on all the notices in the city's LEP languages. This is important information about your housing. If you do not understand it, have someone translate it for you now or request a translation from your landlord. And this is, again, part of the piece that Office of Financial Empowerment will really give a great assist to. One, for sure in all the LEP languages is what the ordinance says, but our departments are really great at just kind of putting probably like the 10 top languages spoken so that those are available to landlords to use, because really it's about providing the resources. We're not trying to keep information from folks. Relocation assistance is equal to 3 months of rent per the rental agreement, and the landlord must pay the relocation assistance within 30 days after receiving the tenant's written notice of termination, or within 30 days that the landlord notifies that the rental agreement will be terminated or not renewed. Enforcement. That looks really large on the screen. I didn't mean for it to look so large, but there is enforcement, and there's several avenues here. But somebody impacted can file a complaint with DSI. DSI will make a determination where appropriate, provide written notification, or like a correction notice is something that people might often refer to that as. Appeals are heard by the legislative hearing officer, who makes a recommendation to council. And there's always the availability of a private right of action. I put this kind of retaliation prohibited like across the bottom because in all cases, and this doesn't just apply to this Chapter 193, it's a state law, but we reiterate it here because of its significance. Landlords are not allowed to retaliate for any complaint related to rental property. So once administrative citations, I do add this here, are established in ordinance, we anticipate coming back and adding that criteria as it relates to this topic. And lastly, just a couple other changes that we know we're going to come back to that will just show up as different actions by City Council. The Department of Safety and Inspections, we don't currently have this authority in our cadre of abilities, and so there is an administrative chapter related to DSI. Come back to make sure that administering this ordinance is in that. So that's Chapter 13 of the Admin Code. There was a budget that I believe was contingency or passed in late 24, and that'll have to be firmed up and have a budget amendment related to the staffing and implementation funding related to this. And then lastly, because we have this existing Chapter 54 and especially the transparency piece and the prescriptive criteria that is in 193, there are conflicts now with 54. So the pieces of 54 that are value add to 193 have already been added in the version that you're seeing, but we'll be coming back with just a full deletion of 54s to remove those conflicts. That's what I have for you.
Great. Thank you so much for the comprehensive information about this ordinance. And just for all my colleagues, we are looking at version 2 in Legistar. That's the version we're talking about. Any questions for Director Wiese before we go to the public hearing? Doesn't look like it. Thanks so much. Nope, but Director Weese, I think, will be around, and you're welcome to email us comments. We'll now go to the public hearing. So once again, we'd love to invite people to line up on both sides. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. You don't need to adjust the microphones. Say your name, where you're coming from, and make sure to sign in afterwards. And again, this is specifically about the tenant protections ordinance. So
Is version 2 something else?
was version 2 just put in today?
Yes. Do you want that to move that so that's the version in front of you?
Sure. Would you like to move version? Ms. Johnson, would you like to move version 2?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson moves version 2. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7 in favor, no one opposed. The amendment is approved.
Sorry about that. Little piece of housekeeping. Sir, come on up. Welcome. You're our first testifier.
Thank you, City Council and President. Scott Hesselgrave, St. Paul East Side and Hazel Park area. When I was watching these slides, I noticed the enforcement area. Well, that enforcement area circumvents courts that are responsible to the Constitution, thereby giving DSI extensive bureaucratic extortion punishment power that exceeds their entitled department name of safety and inspections. Otherwise, the entire bill, it's like an omnibus package of a few good things. There's some really good things in there, things that I've always done, like a Martin Luther King-esque thing, like don't look at a person's credit score, look at the content of their report, for just one. But the biggest complaint I have about it is it strips us of our safe boundaries to say no to the most predatory felons, murderers, rapists, arsonists, all of them. And our state doesn't really have programs that truly rehabilitate felons whom have been convicted of demonstrating a lack of empathy for their victims and for society that elected legislators to pass the laws that they broke in the first place. So then they go to prison, and that environment exacerbates traumatically their offensive defense mechanisms and we have nothing to help them heal, no way to prove it, and I don't care how long it's been. We should have a right to say no to predatory felons in our own homes, which the definition of let is, the root word of lease is let. They still use the same word in Britain. I'm going to let out a flat, you know. That's contract rights right there. They should always be fair. And this is the last thing we just discussed. That's discriminating against the little guys for the corporations. I forgot. I didn't get to insert that in there before. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
So if you
sir.
can break it down into those single.
Thank you so much. Make sure to sign in. And before we, at the end of the public hearing, I will invite Director Weese back up just to talk about the criminal screening criteria, because I think that's a good thing to clarify in terms of what we're talking about and not talking about. We'll continue with the public hearing, though. Come on up. Welcome.
Hello. Hi, my name is Barbara Bennett. I live in Ward 5. I attend the Refuge Church in Ward 6 in St. Paul. I am a leader with Isaiah. Now, 24 years ago, my landlord charged me $1,600 for repairs that were not listed in my lease. He tacked on fees that were outside of the rent that I was supposed to pay. I didn't know what my rights were as a renter, so I paid the fee. In 2024, 20 years later, my daughter had a landlord who charged $800 for repairs on things in the apartment that were already broken before she moved in. The toilet was running and broken. It got so bad that the toilet leaked into the other parts of the unit. My granddaughter has special needs children and is a renter. Within the last couple of years, she lived in a unit that was infested with rats, and the landlord told her that she should get cats to deal with the issue. Both my daughter and granddaughter were afraid of saying something because they were afraid of losing her home and experiencing retaliation. My story demonstrates that generations of renters like myself and my daughter and my granddaughter have suffered by not having more tenant protections and clear responsibilities, especially for landlords. This allows them to take advantage of renters with no accountability. It's frustrating that a version of this ordinance was repealed 5 years ago, and we've had to wait so long to get them back. In the last week, I talked to dozens of renters who express a hunger for a kind of protections that are being discussed today. They signed on in support of this ordinance, which I evidence in my hands here. They appreciate the inclusion of a pre-eviction notice and all agree that there is still more we can do to support renters. In the coming years, I think we need to ban source of income discrimination, have just cause protections.
Thank
For
you,
now,
ma'am. You are at time.
I ran out of time?
Yeah, thank you so much. You can always submit written testimony.
All right,
too.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in and welcome up. Don't all jump at once.
Council President and City Council members, my name is Dwayne Johnson. I live in Ward 4. I'm in favor of this package of tenant rights because I believe that it is vital for the health and dignity of our families in St. Paul. I speak to you now as a 30-year homeowner, and before that, a 20-year renter. I rented what we call mom and pop units. I usually had good landlords, but a few didn't respond to my concerns: missing storm windows, rent rises without warning, theft. This left me feeling frustrated and powerless. So I moved out as soon as possible. In those days, you could find affordable duplexes or apartments nearby and still remain in the same community. Today, many housing options simply aren't available in St. Paul. Affordable rental units and starter homes are especially hard to find. Two of my friends have had to move out of the city for that reason. Now it is difficult to simply move away from landlord conflicts, especially if you want to stay in the same neighborhood or school district. I'm a homeowner now, but half our city residents are renters. It is in my interest, our interest, that tenants should feel confidence and stability akin to owning their own home. They should receive timely notices of landlord intentions, especially when there is an ownership change, and relocation assistance when needed. In short, they should enjoy a clear and fair landlord-tenant relationship that reflects the values we want in all our residents: respect and a chance to put down roots, thrive, and make contribution to our community. These tenant protections take us another step in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in and welcome up.
Good evening again, Council President, members of the City Council. My name is Cecil Smith. I'm President and CEO of the Minnesota Multi-Housing Association, known as MHA. I'm here today to offer MHA's perspective on Ordinance 2531 concerning tenant protections. Much has changed since the original 2020 package of St. Paul tenant protections was repealed. The Minnesota legislature has implemented significant changes to landlord-tenant laws that govern how our industry must operate in this state. And we continue to train our members on how to remain in compliance with these new requirements. One thing has not changed, however, is how this draft ordinance addresses the use of an applicant's credit history. The language appears to be identical to that found in the ordinance that passed in 2020, which was litigated and repealed by the City Council. It remains unworkable. When a rental property owner accepts a new residence application, it is essential that the owner has confidence that the rent will be paid. That's fundamental to this business relationship. This proposal would prohibit a property owner from rejecting an applicant based on credit history unless the credit report demonstrates a failure to pay rent or utility bills. That's the language. This language does not allow property owners to consider bankruptcies, foreclosures, garnishments. While credit scores alone may not fully capture an applicant's overall creditworthiness, other aspects of their credit history should be permitted when making decisions about credit risk. Additionally, we find the 30-day pre-eviction notice requirement disappointing. Currently, St. Paul does not require a notice period as a city policy, and the legislature recently enacted a statewide 14-day notice period. With no data available on the effect of the new 14-day notice, this proposal would go ahead and more than double it. We urge you to reconsider these measures, especially when considering the totality of all the other proposed changes.
Thank you very much. Make sure to sign in. Come on up.
Hi, good evening, I guess, at this point, Council. My name is Jessica Sheminsky. I'm a policy attorney at the Housing Justice Center and a former renter in Ward 4. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for finally bringing back the safe ordinances. It was a disappointment when we lost them the first time a few years ago, and just really glad that the council has brought this back and is ensuring that the tenants get these necessary rights that they need to have safe and dignified lives. In particular, I want to praise the screening reform provisions, especially the acknowledgement that a credit score is not an accurate representation of whether someone will pay the rent on time. As Director Wiese was alluding to, the rent eats first. And of all of the numbers that play into what makes up a credit score, whether or not they've paid their rent on time every month is not a factor. And so I just appreciate that we have a greater understanding and appreciation for what actually goes into ensuring that a tenant's going to be a suitable tenant for the housing. I also am very grateful that this ordinance includes a 30-day pre-eviction notice. While the state standard of 14 days is an amazing start, the unfortunate reality is that 14 days is not enough for tenants to, if they were losing or if they are behind on rent, it takes more than 14 days to access resources from the county or nonprofit assistance to be able to come up with that monthly payment. And 30 days is a much better standard for ensuring that the rent gets paid, which is what the landlords ultimately want. So thank you so much. I appreciate all of your time.
Thank you. Make sure to sign in and welcome up.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Mullins, and I'm a leader with Isaiah, and I live in Ward 1. I've been a renter in the Summit U neighborhood for 19 years. I support the Tenant Protections Ordinance, and as a renter my full adult life, I've experienced both good and bad landlords. And I really appreciate how this ordinance addresses really practical, tactical things that renters run into. As a tenant, I seek to have a good faith relationship with my landlord, and I deserve the stability of finding a properly maintained unit and the opportunity to set roots in my neighborhood. I also recognize that landlords are running a business investment. In one apartment, I've had 3 different property owners, very different styles of property management, and not all good. So, one time, I found out about the sale after it closed. Another time, I was informed about the sale before the sign went up, but that was really just a waiting game of a different kind. Ultimately, as a tenant, my concern is, will I end up looking for a new rental at a schedule, not of my choosing, because who knows when it's going to sell? Will I basically be screened out because I don't fit the new owner's business model of what they're expecting? And I've talked with other renters who've experienced this kind of uncertainty, and a common theme is to scramble to understand your rights. So I really, when you're in this situation, like you just don't know if the new owner is going to be a good fit. And so the lack of a common baseline, definitions, procedures, criteria is very, very, very stressful. So this is why this ordinance is so important. Laying out standard criteria, common criteria is important. Security deposit caps, renter screening criteria, advance notice of sale, relocation assistance should all be very clear and consistent across different properties and different owners at the same property. So,
All right, time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for advancing this.
Thank you. And don't forget to sign in. Welcome up. Are you in line to speak?
She went before.
This is, yes, for the tenant protections ordinance. Welcome up.
She did go before, too. That's why
Yes.
she was asking if she could
Oh.
go, because she already took 2 minutes at the red stab.
Yeah, you're welcome to come back again. That was my mistake.
I was going to leave. My baby fell asleep. Okay. Hi, my name is Sandy Timua. I did look at the ordinances. I looked at all the public comments. One thing that I'd like to bring up is I understand that it is saying stuff about us giving renters information about calling this number and that number for rent assistance, things like that. My concern is this, is that I believe that it's a violation of our First Amendment rights. We have a right to speech, but we also have a right to not have to speak. I can recall in 2017 and 2018, Councilmember Kim, I did have a conversation with you when you were in aid with Ben Mellon. I told you I'm a three-time voter education manager, Metro-wide. I did the work that your organization has been able to continue. And I've said that government's job is to get the word out, and we cannot be compelled. And I understand that the judge struck that specific ordinance down to get voting information out. And I believe that this mirrors that. And I just think that that is, again, a violation of our First Amendment speech. The last thing is, there are many mom and pop rental property owners, housing providers who actually are ahead of you guys and do a lot of these things already. My thing is that instead of being punitive, I think that there was a missed opportunity to build positive relationships for us. I mean, Naker, we've met before, Yang, we've met before, and I apologize if I haven't made that time to cultivate that relationship. I think that folks want to come up and help if they're being validated and being rewarded for already doing that. I have not required a credit score for 7 years because I know what that means in the communities I serve. And so I think there's a way to empower not only renters, but also existing owners to do that in a way that is celebratory as opposed to punitive. The last thing is DSI. I don't think they have the jurisdiction to make these decisions. I'm really concerned with that. I believe that's government overreach. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Don't forget to sign in if you didn't before. All right, with that, is there anyone else here to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, I will take a motion from Ms. Johnson to close the public hearing. No, I guess we'll also continue this one. To continue the public hearing till May 7th. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is continued to May 7th.
I did, if it's all right, just want to give Director Weese 1 moment to come up, if you are willing, just before we move on from the subject, and clarify, because I had the question as well when you were presenting, just about the screening criteria and the criminal history. There was a question raised in the public testimony about who that would allow in, who that would not allow in, and I'm curious about the details of that part of the policy, if you know them.
Just related to the criminal history? So there's actually A through J on criminal history, and civil too. So the first one is cannot screen out for any arrest or charge with an inactive case that did not result in a conviction. Second is participation in or completion of a diversion program or deferral of judgment program. Third is a court file that is not public or has been expunged or destroyed. Fourth is conviction that leads or that has been vacated or expunged, where the applicant received a stay of imposition for the sentence and complied with the terms of the stay. So, there is no charge if there's no same or similar type of charge. Fifth is any conviction for a crime that is no longer illegal in the state of Minnesota. Next is a conviction for any determination or adjudication in juvenile justice system. There's an actual specific statute referenced in that. Next is a petty misdemeanor offense, just specifying that it's not a criminal offense, and for the purposes of this chapter, that can't be grounds for denial. Next is a conviction for a misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor for which the date of sentencing served is over 3 years old. 2 more. Next is is really an exception to the last one, and it's really related to controlled substances. So the exception related to controlled substances goes up to 7 years rather than the 3 years for sentence served. It's from the date of the last date of sentence served. And then the last one is a criminal conviction for the following felony offenses, and it lists a whole host of them, and they list them by state statute, but they're the really bad ones, if you can imagine. And that is last date of sentence served is more than 10 years.
Okay. Thanks very much. I appreciate the clarification on that part of the ordinance. Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. And just for further clarity as well, I heard earlier today a public hearing testimony about a provided example related to an eviction notice, the 30-day eviction notification. And I know I heard it in your presentation, but I think it's really important to draw this distinction again on the reason behind the 30-day notice of what it has to be, because I didn't hear in that public testimony any inability from that tenant to pay, so I didn't think it was necessarily completely equivalent. So could you just verify again the language behind in which case a 30-day eviction notice would have to be cleared? And then also following that, are you aware of the other cities that have 30-day notices in the Twin Cities area?
So the section in the ordinance is 193.04, and the title of the chapter is Written Notice for Non-Payment of Rent. And so it's really, the section is really solely based on the non-payment of rent and giving time for, to come into compliance on the payment piece. So all things being equal, all lease conditions being met other than non-payment, that is what the ordinance is providing for, a 30-day time to get into compliance with the back pay or the back payment. I know Minneapolis has a similar ordinance. I haven't done the research on other jurisdictions, but yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that, including St. Louis Park as well, and some of the other municipalities that have caught up. I know that we will have multiple different discussions on this item, but I encourage for folks to continue to dive into scenarios in which are included in this ordinance and scenarios that are not. And the reason why I encourage folks to continue to not only be a part of that discussion is just because there's an education point for that. This is not the same ordinance that came in front of the same body years ago. It is an ordinance to try and essentially ratify the promise that we made to the St. Paul voters that has went unratified for multiple years. And so I personally am just really supportive of this. I know that we'll get into the further, maybe on May 7th, as we're laying through, I'll definitely have more things to say. But, one of the things that I just want to take the time and opportunity to say is a huge thank you to Director Weesey, to the City Attorney's Office, to the Director of Public, it's 7:10. The Office of Financial Empowerment, Director of Planning and Economic Development, the lead city attorney, genuinely multiple people have been looking at this ordinance and have been working to really try and bring this to what you see here. I was excited to be a council member who, when I led, it was something that I really wanted to bring in front of this body. And also on top of that, just genuinely, you heard from other testimonies, my ward is just impacted on this issue differently than some of ours. And it's really important for us to have multiple conversations with the individuals that are greatly impacted as well. So, I know there was a public hearing, and I just wanted to take the time to simply say thank you to those that have stayed. And I definitely tracked all of the different public comments that have came. I've personally been reading through every public comment that has come in on tenant protections for or against, because I think it's really important to understand where community is on this. But I also want to encourage us and everyone who has very strong feelings, or even just, maybe think that this, maybe they don't have strong feelings about this ordinance, to talk to a renter about it. And I think that that's really where, the promise we made in 2021 around this was to renters. And I really look forward to bringing it back at the Senate, at the center of that. And And so I just appreciate the time that you've taken. I appreciate the fact that you have stayed for 4 hours to give the staff report and to answer questions. We know that you didn't have, you kind of did in this situation, have to do that. But I think it's really important and imperative for folks to understand what is and what is not in this ordinance, for my council colleagues as well. And so I look forward to continuing this work and recognize that overall, this is the first time that it's been brought back in 4 years. So I look forward to being able to continue this journey with you all. And if people have questions, I'm going to motion to keep the public hearing open because I want to continue to hear from folks about it. I'm sure we'll have a couple more community events between now and then as well from our office in Ward 4 and also most likely in my ward because we didn't get a chance to do that, but now we can, Councilmember Pravatsky. So I'm very, very excited about that. And I just wanted to say thank you to those who actually sat patiently to testify on this item, and I hope we encourage folks to do so. One of the questions I didn't get to ask earlier was how many renters we had in the room, and I heard people identify themselves as such. I represent a ward where a lot of people are young and a lot of people are people of color. And sometimes that's missing in a lot of the room that we have, and it was definitely missing today in who testified and who didn't testify. And that's something that for me is why we knock doors and why we talk to people at their building about this. And so I encourage any property owner, any developer who wants to come and work with me when it comes to especially bringing access to being able to talk with your tenants directly. I won't turn that down ever. So feel free to invite me and we'll go knock your building. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Ms. Johnson. And I want to thank Ms.
Sorry, I sincerely apologize. The real thanks goes to my husband, who is managing the household for the last 4 hours, and he will isolate this clip and play it over and over and over again. So thank you, husband, for making dinner and doing all the trips and all the volunteering so that I could be here.
Thank you, Mr. Weesey, on behalf of the entire St. Paul City Council. We will let you go. Thank you, Director Weesey. And really, thanks so much, Ms. Johnson, to you for your leadership on this issue. We would not be here without you. And Ms. Joe, same to you on rent stabilization. I meant to say this earlier as well. We have two really enormous, significant pieces of legislation in front of us in the first 4 months of this year, and that is because of the quality of the leadership that we have on this council. So thank you to you both, and we'll be talking more about that in the coming weeks. With that, I think we're up to item 26.
Item 26 is Resolution Public Hearing 25-31, ratifying the assessment for sanitary sewer replacement within the street right-of-way from the public sewer to the property line done with the Cleveland Avenue Street Reconstruction Project.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak on this item?
Did we take a vote?
No.
You did before.
We did, and then I started talking about it again.
All right, just make sure. Okay.
That's okay. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak on this item? It's confusing because lots of people were getting up, but they were leaving. All right, seeing none, I'll take a motion from Mr. Pravatsky to close the public hearing and approve. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye. 7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted.
That should bring us to the end of our agenda. Thank you all so much for a marathon session. Have a great night. We are adjourned.